Hello guys, welcome to Pika Fiction. So in this video, we will see what if Ash returned to Kalos as a master and finally got married to Serena. If you enjoy these kinds of stories, don't forget to show us some love by hitting the like button and subscribing to the channel. Your support means the world to us. Now, let's start the story. Chapter 1, The Monarch and the Queen. The air in Lumio City tasted of ozone, ambition, and burnt sugar from the crepe stands in the North Boulevard. Ash Ketchum drew it in, a long, slow breath that seemed to settle the frantic energy of the metropolis into something he could understand. It had been years, but the city's pulse was unmistakable, a chaotic, joyful, relentless thrum of life. He felt it not just in his ears, but in the soles of his shoes, a vibration that ran up his spine and settled in his chest like a second heartbeat. Pikachu, perched on his customary spot on Ash's shoulder, twitched his nose, his senses overloaded with 1,000 new smells. "Pika," he chirped, a soft question. "I know, buddy," Ash murmured, his voice a low rumble that was barely audible over the din of hover cars and chattering crowds. "It's a lot louder than I remember." He wore simple, practical clothes, dark jeans, a charcoal gray Henley, and a deep red, unzipped jacket that bore no logos or emblems. There was no hat, no outward sign of the title he now carried. The world monarch didn't need a crown. His presence was enough. It was a stillness he had cultivated over years of standing in the eye of storms, both literal and legendary. He moved through the throng of people not by pushing, but by finding the gaps before they appeared, a river stone parting the current without effort. People slid past, their eyes brushing over him and dismissing him as just another face in the crowd, and that was exactly how he wanted it. His journey to Kalos hadn't been a grand procession. It was a quiet, commercial flight into the regional airport, a solitary walk to the train, and a silent ride into the heart of the city. He was here for the Lumiose Accords, a summit convened to address the growing instability along the world's ley lines of power. It was his duty to attend, to be the voice for the legendary guardians he had befriended, to ensure the balance was maintained. But that was the official reason. The truth, the one that beat in time with the city's pulse inside his chest, had a different name. Serena. He let his senses drift, casting a net of awareness across the city. It was a skill honed not in battle, but in the quiet solitude of places like the Tree of Beginning and the summit of Mount Coronet. He had learned to feel the world's aura, the life force that bound everything together. Most people were small, flickering flames of light. A strong trainer might be a steady bonfire. A city like Lumiose was a raging inferno. Yet, somewhere across the sea of energy, he felt a beacon, a warm, steady, rose-gold light that was as familiar to him as Pikachu's weight on his shoulder. It was a song of grace and quiet strength. He smiled, a small, private thing. He knew where he was going. He turned off the main boulevard and into a quieter, more artistic district, the cobblestone streets lined with galleries and performance studios. The energy here was different, less frantic, more focused. It was the energy of creation. As he walked, a sudden spike of discordant energy ripped through the placid atmosphere. It was sharp, cold, and tasted of panic. "Wrong," was the only word that formed in his mind. A block away, screams erupted. People poured out of a side street, their faces masks of terror. A man in a business suit scrambled past Ash, shouting, "It's gone mad." The Garchomp from the construction site, "It's tearing up the street." Ash's calm didn't break. He simply turned towards the chaos. "Pikachu, stay close." "Pika," his partner affirmed, cheeks sparking with readiness. Rounding the corner, Ash saw it. A massive Garchomp, its hide the color of a deep-sea trench, was thrashing wildly in the middle of the street. It wasn't rampaging with malice, it was acting out of sheer, unadulterated terror. Its eyes were wide, pupils dilated, and it slammed its powerful tail against the side of a building, sending stone and plaster showering down onto the street. Cars swerved, one crashing into a lamppost with a sickening crunch. The air was thick with the Garchomp's guttural cries of agony. A pair of Kalosian police officers had their Pokemon out, two mighty hyenas, who were barking and snarling, trying to corral the land shark, but they only succeeded in making it more frantic. "Don't get any closer," one officer yelled at the growing crowd of onlookers. "We've called for a ranger, but they're 10 minutes out." 10 minutes. The Garchomp would bring the whole block down in 5. Ash didn't run. He walked forward, his pace steady, his focus absolute. The police officer saw him and held up a hand. "Sir, get back. It's not safe." Ash didn't even look at him. His gaze was locked on the Garchomp, and he was doing more than just looking. He was reaching out with his aura, pushing past the thrashing limbs and the terrified roars, searching for the source of the pain. He felt it, a high-frequency, needle-like vibration piercing the Pokemon's mind, like a siren buried in its skull. It was artificial. Unnatural. "Pikachu, not you," Ash said quietly, as his partner tensed for a thunderbolt. "This isn't a fight." He kept walking, his hands open at his sides. The Garchomp finally noticed him, a single, small figure approaching against the tide of fleeing people. It let out a roar that shook the very ground, a blast of sound meant to intimidate, to drive him away. Ash didn't flinch. He projected a feeling, not a command, but a wave of pure, undiluted calm. It was the feeling of a quiet forest after a rain, of a still mountain lake at dawn. He sent it flowing from his core, a silent hum of reassurance that washed over the Garchomp's panicked state. "I am not a threat. I am here to help." The Garchomp flinched, its head tilting. The thrashing of its tail slowed. It was confused. The pain in its head was screaming, but this new feeling was a soothing balm. It lowered its head slightly, its reptilian eyes, wide with fear, locking onto Ash's. "Easy now," Ash said, his voice finally audible as the creature's roars subsided into pained groans. He was 20 feet away now. "It's okay. Just breathe." He could feel the piercing frequency more clearly now, a jagged shard of ice in the Garchomp's aura. It was a targeted attack. Deliberate. He needed to get closer. He took another step. The Garchomp shuddered, a tremor running through its powerful frame, and it tensed again, the pain overwhelming the calm. Ash knew he had only one chance. He pushed his own aura forward, not just as a feeling, but as a shield, wrapping it around the Garchomp's mind to insulate it from the invasive frequency. The effect was immediate. The Garchomp's posture sagged with relief, the tension draining from its muscles. It blinked, the madness in its eyes receding, replaced by a weary confusion. He was now close enough to touch it. He slowly raised a hand and pressed his palm flat against the creature's rough, scaly snout. A final, powerful pulse of his aura flowed from him into the Pokemon, a deep, resonant hum that completely silenced the artificial signal in its head. The Garchomp let out a low, shuddering sigh and its eyes fluttered closed. It slunk to the ground, not unconscious, but utterly exhausted, its breathing evening out. The street fell silent. The crowd, the police officers, everyone stared, mouths agape. One moment, a terrifying monster was destroying their street. The next, a lone young man had calmed it with a touch. Ash ignored them. Keeping one hand on the Garchomp to keep it steady, he closed his eyes and used his other sense, the one that felt the world in patterns and vibrations. He followed the lingering echo of the malicious frequency. It was fading. Fast, but the source was close. His eyes snapped open and he looked not at the Garchomp, but at the base of the lamppost the car had crashed into. He walked over, knelt, and ran his fingers along the dented metal. There, tucked into a maintenance seam, was a small, metallic disc, no bigger than a coin. It was sleek, black, and cool to the touch. As he plucked it from its hiding spot, the last dregs of its energy signature vanished completely. He turned it over in his palm. There were no markings, no brand, just a marvel of miniaturized, malevolent technology. He felt a cold knot tighten in his stomach. He'd felt technology used for evil before, but this was different. It was cleaner, more precise. More insidious. He slipped the disc into his jacket pocket just as the officers cautiously approached, their mighty hyenas now sitting placidly, whining in confusion. How did you do that?" the first officer asked, his voice filled with awe. "Are you an Aura Guardian?" Ash gave him a simple, disarming smile. "Just a friend to Pokemon," he said, the practiced answer rolling easily off his tongue. He looked back at the Garchomp, which was now being tended to by its frantic trainer, a man in a hard hat who had just arrived. It wasn't its fault. Something was hurting it. He didn't wait for more questions. He gave a nod to the officers and melted back into the flow of the city, Pikachu now nestled calmly back on his shoulder. The incident had taken no more than 5 minutes, but it had changed the entire tenor of his arrival. This wasn't just a social visit or a diplomatic duty anymore. Something was wrong in Kalos. The rose-gold light of Serena's aura led him to a beautifully restored building with large, arched windows. A simple, elegant sign read, Studio Yvonne. It was a school for Pokemon performers, one of the most prestigious in the region. Her school. He felt a swell of pride that was so strong it almost buckled his knees. He pushed the door open and stepped inside. The lobby was bright and airy, decorated with photos of smiling girls and their Pokemon partners. In the center of the wall was a massive, framed portrait of Serena from the day she had been crowned Kalos Queen, holding a bouquet of roses, her Delphox and Pangoro at her side, her smile so radiant it seemed to light up the room. She looked regal, confident, and breathtakingly beautiful. A young receptionist at the front desk looked up. "Can I help you?" "I'm here to see Serena," Ash said. "Do you have an appointment?" "Queen Serena is in a private rehearsal." Queen Serena. The title sounded both foreign and perfectly fitting. "No, I don't," Ash admitted. "But I think she'll see me. Could you just tell her a friend from Pallet Town is here?" The receptionist looked skeptical, but a performer's life was full of eccentric people. She sighed and tapped an intercom. "Your Majesty, there's a gentleman here to see you. He says he's a friend, from Pallet Town." There was a pause, and then Serena's voice, clear and melodic even through the tinny speaker, came through, laced with a hint of breathless confusion. "From Pallet Town. Send him to Studio A, Chloe." "Thank you." Chloe pointed down a long hallway. "It's the last door on the left." Ash gave her a grateful nod. "Thanks." As he walked down the hall, the sounds of music grew louder, a sweeping, orchestral piece full of soaring strings and dramatic pauses. The door to Studio A was slightly ajar. He pushed it open a fraction wider and peered inside. The studio was enormous, with a polished wooden floor that reflected the light from the floor-to-ceiling windows. And there, in the center of the vast room, was Serena. She was a vision. She wore simple black leggings and a flowing, pale pink top, her honey blonde hair tied back in a simple ponytail. She was moving with a fluid grace that stole his breath, not dancing herself, but directing her Pokemon in a complex, interwoven ballet. Her Sylveon traced patterns of light with its ribbons weaving between the powerful, grounded steps of her Pangoro. Her Delphox stood in the center, its branch held aloft like a conductor's baton, summoning soft, harmless embers that floated in the air like fireflies, accenting the beats of the music. This was not the tentative girl he had traveled with. This was a master of her craft. She moved with an economy of motion, a flick of her wrist, a sharp nod of her head, conveying complex instructions that her Pokemon understood instantly. There was a bond there, a synergy that Ash recognized intimately. It was the same connection he had with his own team, refined and perfected through thousands of hours of shared experience. She was painting a story in the air with movement and light, and it was the most beautiful thing he had ever seen. He watched, mesmerized, as the music reached its crescendo. Delphox raised its branch, and the embers swirled together, forming a magnificent, fiery blossom that hovered in the center of the room. Pangoro struck a final, powerful pose, and Sylvian wrapped its ribbons around the flower, which dissolved into a shower of golden sparkles that rained down on the three Pokémon as they bowed. The music faded. For a moment, there was only the sound of their breathing. "It's good," Serena said, her voice carrying in the quiet room. "But the transition at the crescendo is still a little rushed, Pangoro. We need to feel the pause before the release. Let's take 5. Pangoro grunted in understanding. Sylvian hopped onto Serena's shoulder, nuzzling her cheek. It was then that the fairy-type's feelers twitched. It looked towards the door, its bright blue eyes widening. It let out a happy cry. "Vion." Serena turned, following her Pokémon's gaze. Her eyes found the figure standing in the doorway. Her professional focus dissolved, replaced by a wave of stunned disbelief. Her lips parted, but no sound came out. Her hand went to her chest, as if to make sure her heart was still beating. Ash took that as his cue. He pushed the door open fully and stepped into the studio, a soft smile on his face. Pikachu chirped a greeting from his shoulder. "Hey, Serena." For a second, she was frozen. Then, a slow, brilliant smile spread across her face, a smile that dwarfed the one in the portrait in the lobby. It was real, and it was just for him. "Ash?" she breathed, the name a whispered question, a confirmation, a prayer answered. He just nodded. That was all it took. She ran. She closed the distance between them in a heartbeat, her poise and grace replaced by a pure, unthinking joy. She didn't slow down, launching herself into his arms. He caught her effortlessly, his arms wrapping around her waist, lifting her off the ground in a spinning hug that was so full of relief and unspoken longing it made the whole room feel warmer. She laughed, a sound that was pure music, burying her face in the crook of his neck. He could feel her trembling slightly. He held her tighter, his own eyes squeezed shut, just breathing in the familiar scent of her hair, a mix of cherry blossoms and sunshine. "You're here," she whispered against his skin. "You're really here." "I'm here," he confirmed, his voice thick with emotion. He set her down but didn't let go, his hands resting on her waist. Her hands came up to frame his face, her thumbs tracing his cheekbones. Her eyes, the color of a Kalos sky at dusk, searched his, taking in the changes. He was taller, broader in the shoulders. The boyish softness of his face had been planed away by time and responsibility, leaving behind a stronger jaw and a calmer, more knowing gaze. But the warmth in his eyes, the kindness, that was the same. That was all Ash. "The world monarch," she said, a hint of awe in her voice. "I watched the whole thing. I was screaming at the television. I think my neighbors thought I was crazy." He chuckled, the sound deep and warm. "And the Kalos Queen. I've seen your performances online. They're incredible, Serena. You're amazing." The compliment landed, and a soft blush rose on her cheeks. "I had a good teacher in showmanship," she said, her eyes flicking to him meaningfully. "Always diving headfirst into things." Pikachu, tired of being ignored, scrambled from Ash's shoulder onto hers, nuzzling her with a happy, "Cha." Serena laughed, scratching the electric mouse behind the ears. "Hi, Pikachu. I've missed you, too." Sylvian floated over, nudging Ash's hand with its head, demanding its own attention. He complied, stroking its head. "Hey, Sylvian. You're looking as strong as ever." The moment was a perfect, fragile bubble of happiness. The years apart seemed to melt away, leaving behind only the solid, unshakable foundation of their bond. It was different now, deeper. The frantic, youthful crush had matured into a quiet, profound certainty. "Come on," she said, finally taking a step back, though her hand found his and laced their fingers together without a second thought. It felt as natural as breathing. "My office is this way. You have to tell me everything. Why are you here? Are you just visiting?" How long are you staying? It's a long story, he said, letting her lead him out of the studio. I have time, she replied, squeezing his hand. For you, I have all the time in the world. Serena's office was less an office and more a comfortable, sun-drenched living room. A plush sofa sat against one wall, across from a large desk buried under sketches for performance routines and letters from fans. Trophies from her victories were arranged neatly on a shelf, but they felt less like boasts and more like fond memories. Her Kalos queen crown sat on a velvet cushion inside a glass case, catching the afternoon light. She kicked off her shoes and curled up on one end of the sofa, tucking her feet beneath her. Ash sat on the other end, Pikachu immediately hopping off his shoulder to curl up on a cushion, sighing contentedly. Sylvian rested its head in Serena's lap. Okay, she said, her full attention on him. Talk. Why is the world monarch sneaking into my studio instead of being paraded down the boulevard? Ash leaned back, the tension from the Garchomp incident finally beginning to recede in the warmth of her presence. There's a summit. The Lumiose Accords. It's about the recent disturbances with legendary Pokémon. It's my job now, to mediate things like this. Her brow furrowed with concern. I've heard about those. A hurricane out of season near Hoenn, earthquakes in Sinnoh. People are scared. He nodded grimly. They have a right to be. The balance is fragile. That's the official reason I'm here. She tilted her head, her gaze perceptive. And the unofficial reason? He met her eyes, and for a moment, he was the 16-year-old boy on the escalator again, unsure of what to say, how to say it. But he wasn't that boy anymore. He said simply. The single word hung in the air, honest and heavy. I couldn't come to Kalos and not see you. Serena's breath hitched. A slow, gentle smile touched her lips. She didn't press, didn't pry. She just accepted it, a quiet understanding passing between them. Tell me about being monarch, she prompted, deftly changing the subject to give him space. What's it really like? Is it just endless battles? He shook his head. The battles are the easy part. It's the weight of it. Every time a legendary Pokémon stirs, the world looks to me. They expect me to have the answers. Sometimes I do. A lot of the time, I'm just listening. Trying to understand what they need. He spoke of his travels since they'd last seen each other, not in a bragging way, but as a series of lessons learned. He spoke of meditating with the guardians of Alola, of feeling the planet breathe from the peak of Mount Silver, of sparring with Raihan in Galar not for victory, but to understand the flow of a dragon's power. He talked about the loneliness of it, of being someone that everyone saw as a symbol, an untouchable champion. She listened, her expression full of empathy. When he finished, she spoke of her own journey. She told him about the struggles of her Hoenn contest run, the crisis of confidence she'd faced, and the moment she realized that performing wasn't about winning, but about connecting with the hearts of the audience and her Pokémon. It's funny, she said, her fingers tracing patterns on Sylvian's head. Becoming Kalos' queen, it was my dream for so long. And when I won, it was the best moment of my life. But then you wake up the next day, and the crown is heavy. Everyone expects you to be perfect, to be this flawless symbol of grace. There's not a lot of room to be just. Serena. He understood completely. They don't see the work, he said. They just see the title. Exactly, she sighed. But it's worth it. When a little girl comes up to me and says she wants to be a performer because she saw my show, that makes it all worth it. She looked at him, her eyes shining. I bet it's the same for you. He nodded. Yeah. It is. They fell into a comfortable silence, the shared understanding of their parallel lives creating a bond stronger than words. They were two people who had reached the absolute pinnacle of their chosen fields, only to find it was a lonely place to be. I saw Clement and Bonnie last month, Serena said, her voice lighter now. Clement is heading up a whole new R&D division at the Prism Tower. He's revolutionizing Kalos's power grid. And Bonnie, you wouldn't recognize her. She's 15. She's about to start her own journey. She talks about you all the time, you know. The hero she traveled with. Ash smiled, a genuine, warm smile. I'd like to see them. Is the gym still prone to exploding? Serena finished for him, a laugh bubbling up. Sometimes. But his inventions work more often than not, now. He's brilliant, Ash. Truly. The hours melted away as they talked, catching up on years of missed moments, of shared friends and separate adventures. The sun began to dip below the Lumio skyline, painting the office in hues of orange and gold. The easy camaraderie they'd always had was still there, but it was layered with something new, something deeper. A mutual respect, a shared solitude, and an unspoken attraction that had only grown stronger with time and distance. He found himself watching the way the fading light caught in her hair, the way she bit her lip when she was thinking, the sheer expressive power of her eyes. He had traveled the world, met countless people, faced down gods and monsters. But no one had ever made him feel the way Serena did. It was a feeling of being seen, of being understood, of being home. As the city lights began to twinkle to life outside the window, he knew he couldn't let the moment pass. The summit would start tomorrow. The world's problems would come crashing back in. But right now, in this quiet room, there was only them. He leaned forward slightly. Serena. She met his gaze, her own expression soft and expectant. Ash. When I was training at Mount Silver, it was quiet. So quiet you could hear your own heartbeat. I spent months there, just listening. To the world. To myself. And I realized something. I've been chasing a finish line my whole life. Becoming a master, then becoming champion, then monarch. And I did it. I got there. He paused, his voice dropping to a near whisper. And the first thing I thought when I was standing there, on top of the world, was that you weren't there to see it. Her eyes widened, glistening with unshed tears. I came here for the Accords, he continued, his voice steady and sure, the indecisive boy gone for good. That's my duty. But I also came here for me. I came here, for you. I had to know if, he trailed off, but he didn't need to finish. She understood. She uncurled her legs from the sofa and moved closer to him, closing the small gap between them. She reached out and took his hand, her fingers warm and firm around his. Ash, she said, her voice trembling just slightly. You didn't have to come all this way to know. You just had to ask. He looked down at their joined hands, then back up to her face. She was smiling, a wobbly, emotional, beautiful smile. This was it. This was the moment. The culmination of a journey that had started with a forgotten straw hat in a forest long ago. He opened his mouth to reply, to say her name, to tell her everything he had kept locked in his heart for years. But he was interrupted by a chime. It was the television in the corner of the room, which had been on mute. The breaking news banner flashed across the screen. Serena, pulled from the moment, picked up the remote and turned up the volume. Another unexplained Pokemon rampage, this time in the outskirts of John City, a news anchor was saying, her face grave. The screen showed shaky phone footage of a rampaging Tauros herd, their eyes glowing with a faint, unnatural red light, their movements jerky and panicked. They were smashing through fences, their cries of distress echoing through the broadcast. Authorities are baffled by this third incident in as many days. Eyewitnesses say the Pokemon seem to be acting out of terror, not aggression. Serena gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. That's terrible. Those poor Pokemon. But Ash wasn't looking at the Tauros. He was staring at the screen, a cold dread washing over him. It was the same as the Garchomp. The same frantic energy, the same unreasoning terror. The same jagged, piercing feeling he could sense even through the television's feed. Without a word, he reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out the small, black disc he had found at the lamppost. He held it in the palm of his hand, his aura sense focused on it. As the news report continued, he felt it, a phantom echo, a sympathetic vibration from the disc, resonating with the energy of the chaos on the screen. It was faint, but it was undeniable. Serena looked at him, her concern for the toros shifting to concern for him. His face had gone hard, his eyes narrowed into the focused, determined look she had seen so many times right before a critical battle. "Ash? What is it?" she asked, her voice soft. He closed his hand around the disc, the smooth, cold metal a stark contrast to the warmth of her hand, which was still holding his other one. He met her gaze, his own dark with a sudden, terrible certainty. "It's the same," he said, his voice low and dangerous. "What's the same?" "The feeling. The energy behind it." He held up his fist, the disc concealed within. "This wasn't an accident. And neither was the one today in the city. This is a pattern. Someone is doing this on purpose." The warm, intimate bubble they had built around themselves popped, replaced by the cold, harsh reality of the world outside. The personal reunion was over. A new, far more dangerous battle had just begun. Chapter 2, An Aegis of Reason. The warmth of Serena's hand in his was an anchor in the sudden, cold sea of dread. The festive lights of Lumio City, twinkling outside the studio window, seemed to mock the grim footage flickering on the television screen. The laughter and music from the streets below felt like sounds from a different world, one that existed before Ash had held the small, malevolent disc in his palm. "On purpose?" Serena's voice was a whisper, the joy of their reunion swept away by the chilling implication. "Who would do that? Why?" "I don't know," Ash admitted, his gaze fixed on the screen where Kalos region officials were giving a strained press conference. "But this isn't just random chaos. It's targeted. It's designed to create fear." He closed his hand again, the edges of the device digging into his skin. The energy signature was a poison, and he had now seen its effects twice. It was a weapon aimed not at the body, but at the very spirit of a Pokémon. Pikachu, sensing the shift in his partner, leaped from the comfortable cushion to Ash's knee, his posture tense, cheeks sparking with low-level static. "Pikachu." Serena's fingers tightened around his. Her initial shock was already solidifying into resolve. The Kalos queen was gone, replaced by the determined girl who had trekked through forests and faced down impending doom at his side. "John City," she said, her tone firm. "We have to go. We need to see it for ourselves." "We?" Ash looked at her, a protest already forming on his lips. This was his burden, his fight. He didn't want to drag her into it. She saw the look in his eyes and cut him off before he could speak, her expression softening but losing none of its steel. "Don't, Ash. Don't you dare try to leave me behind. Not this time." She leaned in, her eyes locking with his. "You said it yourself. You stand on top of the world, and it's lonely. I'm the queen of Kalos, and it's the same. We're not those kids anymore, leaving each other at the airport with a promise. Whatever this is, we face it together. That's the deal." Her words struck him with the force of a physical blow, shattering his instinct to protect her by excluding her. She was right. He had come back for a partner, not a princess to be sheltered in a tower. He gave a slow, deliberate nod. "Together." The word sealed the pact. The air in the room charged with a new energy, not the soft glow of romance, but the sharp, electric hum of a shared purpose. "The last train to John City leaves in an hour," Serena said, already pulling out her holocaster. Her fingers flew across the screen. "I'll book us 2 tickets. We'll need help. Someone who knows Kalos, knows its technology." "Clement," Ash finished, already on the same page. Serena smiled, a quick, sharp flash of her old self. "I'm calling him now." I'll tell him to meet us at the station. And Bonnie, too. If Sigurd's energy is involved in any way, she and Squishy are our best early warning system. Within minutes, the plan was set. They moved with an efficiency born of old habit. Serena changed into more practical traveling clothes, sturdy walking boots, dark trousers, and a warm jacket, while Ash gathered the few things he had. He paused for a moment, looking at the disc in his hand before slipping it into a specially shielded pocket inside his jacket. As they left the studio, Serena paused at the door to her office and looked back at the crown sitting in its glass case. The symbol of her dream, of her reign. Then she looked at Ash, standing in the hallway, his expression grim but his eyes clear and focused, Pikachu a loyal sentinel on his shoulder. She turned the lights off without a second glance and closed the door. The Queen could wait. Serena was needed. The night train to John City was a silver serpent slicing through the dark Kalosian countryside. They found Clement and Bonnie waiting for them on the platform, the reunion a chaotic, happy collision of bodies and voices. Bonnie, no longer the tiny girl in a tyrant rum onesie, was a whirlwind of energy. She was taller, lankier, her blonde hair pulled back in a messy braid. She still had Deden, who was chirping happily from the pocket of her satchel, but she radiated a new confidence. She threw her arms around Ash in a fierce hug. "I knew you'd come back," she exclaimed, her voice still bright but with a new, lower register. "Clement said you were just a legend, but I told him you were real." "Hey!" Clement protested, adjusting his glasses as he pushed a cart laden with scientific equipment. He was still unmistakably Clement, but the constant flicker of anxiety in his eyes had been replaced by a steady, focused intelligence. The jumpsuit was gone, replaced by a lab coat worn over a simple shirt and trousers. "I never said that. I said your reappearance would be a statistically significant event." Ash laughed, clapping his friend on the shoulder. "It's good to see you, Clement. You too, Bonnie. You've grown up." "I'm a trainer now," she announced proudly. "I'm challenging the gyms next year. I'm going to be even stronger than my big brother." "A laudable, if mathematically improbable, goal," Clement muttered, a fond smile playing on his lips. They found an empty compartment on the train, and as soon as the doors hissed shut and the train began to move, the cheerful atmosphere evaporated. Ash laid the dark disc on the table between them. "This is what caused the Garchomp rampage in Lumiose," he said, his voice low. "I think it's the same thing that hit the Tauros in John." Clement's eyes lit up with professional curiosity. He produced a pair of tweezers and a scanner from his bag, his movements precise and practiced. "Fascinating. The casing is a non-ferrous polymer alloy, completely seamless. No obvious power source. This is incredibly advanced. It projects a frequency," Ash explained, "something that feels sharp. It drives Pokémon into a panic." While Clement began a more detailed analysis, his scanner emitting a series of soft beeps, Serena explained what they had seen on the news and the pattern Ash had identified. Bonnie listened intently, her hand resting on her satchel, where a faint green glow pulsed softly. Squishy was awake and listening. "This is more than just a prank," Serena said, her gaze sweeping over their small group. "The locations seem random, a city construction site, a rural farm, but the effect is the same. It creates chaos and turns people against Pokémon." Ash leaned forward, his elbows on the table. "That's the part that bothers me most. It's not just an attack on Pokémon. It makes them look like monsters. It breaks the trust between us." The train rattled on, a rhythmic beat against the silence in the compartment. Clement's scanner suddenly let out a sharp, high-pitched whine. "Incredible," he breathed, staring at his screen. "The energy modulation is incredibly complex. It's not just a generic noise, it's mimicking a biological signal. A highly specific one. Can you tell what it is?" Ash asked, leaning closer. "Not with this field scanner. I'll need to run a full spectral analysis back at my lab. But I can tell you this, whoever built this is a genius. A terrifying one. He carefully placed the disk into a shielded containment box. The future is amazing, he said, a catch in his voice. I never thought I'd be so afraid of it. The rest of the journey passed in a tense quiet. Ash found himself sitting shoulder to shoulder with Serena, their arms brushing. He was acutely aware of her presence, a warm, steady counterpoint to the cold dread the disk had instilled in him. At one point, as if sensing his disquiet, she rested her head on his shoulder. We'll figure this out, she murmured, so softly only he could hear. You're not alone in this. He looked at her, her eyes closed, her face illuminated by the fleeting lights of the passing towns. He had come to Kalos to rekindle a connection, to finally close a chapter left open for too long. He hadn't expected that chapter to be the prologue to a war. But with her beside him, the prospect felt less daunting. He gently rested his head against hers, a silent agreement. John City wasn't a city so much as a sprawling agricultural town, the hub for the ranches and farms that blanketed the rolling green hills of western Kalos. They arrived just after dawn, the air smelling of damp earth and moo-moo milk. But the pastoral tranquility was gone. A palpable tension hung in the air like smoke. People spoke in hushed, anxious whispers. The local Pokémon Center was overflowing with worried trainers and their unsettled Pokémon. They made their way to the epicenter of the previous day's incident, a large ranch on the outskirts of town. The wooden fences were splintered and broken, the ground churned into a muddy mess. The owner, a grim-faced man with worry etched into the lines of his face, recounted the story. It was like a switch flipped, he said, wringing his hands. 1 minute, my toros were grazing peacefully. The next, they were wild. Eyes glowing red, screaming. I've worked with toros my whole life. I've never seen anything like it. It wasn't anger. It was terror. While Serena spoke to the rancher, her voice calm and empathetic, drawing out details the man didn't even know were important, Ash closed his eyes. He reached out with his aura, letting the world fall away until all he could feel were the lingering echoes of the event. He felt it instantly. The same jagged shard of energy he'd felt from the Garchomp, only multiplied a dozen times over. It was weaker now, a fading stain on the fabric of the place, but it was unmistakably the same signature. Beneath it, he could feel the residual psychic imprint of the toros, a tidal wave of pure, mind-shattering panic. But there was something else, too. A second artificial signature, fainter than the first. A receiver. His eyes snapped open. The device that caused this is gone, he said to the group. But there was another one here. Something that was listening. A sensor? Clement mused. To gather data on the effects. Before they could ponder the implication, a convoy of clean, white vans rolled up the dirt road. They stopped, and people in crisp, white uniforms embroidered with a stylized shield logo began to emerge. They moved with an unnerving efficiency, setting up a tent, handing out free Pokémon food, and offering to help repair the broken fences. A woman with a clipboard and a warm, professional smile approached the rancher. Sir, my name is Alara. I'm with the Aegis Foundation, she said, her voice clear and reassuring. We're here to help the community recover from this unfortunate incident. The rancher looked from Alara's polished team to Ash and his friends, confusion on his face. The Aegis Foundation? Serena asked, stepping forward. I'm not familiar with your organization. Alara's smile didn't falter. We're a new philanthropic group dedicated to ensuring a safe and stable future for the people of Kalos. We believe that relying on outdated, mystical forces has led to an unacceptable level of instability. It's time for a more reasoned approach. Her words were smooth, practiced, and deeply unsettling. Ash felt a chill run down his spine. This was it. This was the other side of the coin. The ones who created the chaos, and the ones who offered the solution. As if on cue, a massive holographic screen flickered to life on the side of the lead van. The image of a man coalesced out of the light. He was handsome in a severe sort of way, with sharp features, slicked-back silver hair, and eyes the color of a winter sky. He wore a perfectly tailored dark suit. He radiated an aura of absolute confidence and intellectual superiority. "Citizens of Kalos," the man began, his voice a rich, charismatic baritone that commanded attention. "My name is Cashin. I am the founder of the Aegis Foundation. What happened here in John City, and in Lumios before it, is a tragedy. But it is not an anomaly. It is a symptom of a deeper sickness." The crowd of townspeople, drawn by the commotion, gathered to watch, their faces a mixture of fear and hope. "For generations," Cashin continued, his gaze seeming to pierce right through the screen, "we have lived at the mercy of forces we do not understand. We have placed our faith in godlike Pokemon, in chosen ones, in mystical energies that bring destruction as often as they bring peace. We saw it with Team Flare. We saw Lysandra, a brilliant man, driven to madness by his reliance on the power of a legendary Pokemon. That path leads only to ruin." Ash's fists clenched. Cashin was twisting the truth, using Lysandra's insanity as a weapon against the very idea of the bond between humans and Pokemon. "I offer a new path," Cashin declared, his voice rising with passion. "A future guided not by myth, but by reason. Not by the whims of ancient beasts, but by the limitless potential of human ingenuity. We will build a world where your children are safe, where your livelihoods are secure, where progress is not held hostage by chaos. We will be the masters of our own destiny. We will build an aegis of reason to shield us from the storms of a mystical age." The speech was masterful. It didn't blame the Pokemon, it blamed the system. It offered safety, logic, and control in a world that felt increasingly chaotic. Ash could see the message landing. He saw the nods of agreement in the crowd, the expressions of fear turning into expressions of hope, a hope Cashin was selling them. The hologram of Cashin faded, replaced by the Aegis Shield logo. Elara, the woman from before, turned to the crowd, her smile now tinged with triumph. "Our founder is right. We must seek a better way." She then turned her attention directly to Ash. She must have recognized him, or perhaps just sensed the authority he carried. "You," she said, her tone sharp but still polite. "You seem to be a trainer of some renown. You represent the old way, the reliance on raw power and individual bonds. Will you defend that system? Here, now, in front of these people who have suffered because of it?" It was a trap. A brilliant one. She was challenging him to a public debate. If he refused, he appeared weak, unable to defend his beliefs. If he accepted and spoke of his power, of his connection to legendaries, he would sound exactly like the problem Cashin had just described. If he tried to battle, he would be the monster. Serena's hand found his arm, a silent warning. Clement looked panicked. Bonnie looked angry. Ash looked at the faces in the crowd. He saw their fear, their desperation for an answer, for someone to make them feel safe. He couldn't let Cashin's poison be the only cure they were offered. He met Elara's challenging gaze, his own expression unreadable. When and where? They regrouped in the Pokemon Center, taking a private room to strategize. The mood was grim. "It's a public tribunal," Clement said. Pacing back and forth. "They've set up a stage in the town square for this evening. They're framing it as an open dialogue. It's a show trial, Ash. They'll use logic, statistics, fear, they'll tear you apart. I can fight them," Bonnie declared, stamping her foot. "We know they're the bad guys. We can just tell everyone." "Tell them what, Bonnie?" Serena asked gently. "That we have a hunch. That we found a mysterious piece of technology we can't fully explain yet. All we have is Ash's feeling and a theory. They have vans full of supplies, a charismatic leader, and a simple, powerful message. We'll look like conspiracy theorists. She was right. They were completely outmaneuvered. Ash sat silently, turning the problem over in his mind like a puzzle. He kept replaying Kashin's speech, Elara's challenge. It felt like a Pokemon battle, but one where the types were logic and emotion, and he was at a severe disadvantage. I need to counter his arguments, Ash said, thinking out loud. Clement, you can give me the data on Pokemon/human cooperation benefits, economic impacts. No, Serena said, her voice cutting through his strategic planning. Everyone turned to look at her. She was standing by the window, looking out at the townspeople scurrying nervously through the streets. That's not how you win this, she said, turning to face them. Her eyes were blazing with an intensity Ash hadn't seen since her final performance for the crown. This isn't Clement's invention showcase, and it's not one of your gym battles, Ash. This is a battle for hearts. You can't win it with facts and figures. She walked over to him, kneeling so she was at his eye level. They're not going to attack you. They're going to attack the idea of you. The idea of the bond you share with Pikachu. They'll call it unpredictable, dangerous. They will try to make this, she said, reaching out and gently touching Pikachu's head, seem like a liability. So what do I do? Ash asked, his frustration evident. How do I fight an idea? You don't, she replied, her voice softening. You don't fight it. You show them a better one. Don't get up on that stage and be the world monarch. Don't be a champion or a hero. She paused, her hand moving from Pikachu to rest on Ash's knee. Be the boy from Pallet Town. The one who was late to get his first Pokemon. The one who carried a sick Pidgey through a storm. The one who promised a Larvitar he'd take it home. Don't lecture them about trust and partnership. Tell them a story. Tell them your story. Remind them of a truth they already know, one that Kashin is trying to make them forget, that the bond with a Pokemon isn't a risk to be managed. It's the greatest adventure of our lives. Her words hung in the air, simple, profound, and absolutely right. She wasn't giving him battle strategy, she was reminding him of who he was. She saw past the titles, past the power, and straight to the heart of him. In that moment, he felt a wave of gratitude and admiration so powerful it almost overwhelmed him. She was his partner. His queen. He looked at Pikachu, who met his gaze with absolute, unwavering trust. He thought of all of them, Bulbasaur, Charizard, Sceptile, Infernape, all the friends he had fought alongside. He thought of the promise on the escalator. He took a deep breath and let it out slowly. The tension in his shoulders eased. The strategic part of his brain went quiet, replaced by a deep well of memory and emotion. Okay, he said, a small, confident smile touching his lips. I know what to do. As Serena gave him a proud smile, Clement's holocaster, which had been running diagnostics connected to his lab in Lumiose, let out a piercing alert. My analysis of the disk is complete, he exclaimed, his attention snapping to the screen. A complex waveform was displayed, alongside a rotating image of a DNA helix. I cross-referenced the energy signature with Professor Sycamore's global database of Pokemon biosignatures. His voice trailed off, his face paling. Oh no. Clement, what is it? Ash asked, standing up. Clement looked up from the screen, his eyes wide with horror. The signal. It's not just a generic distress call. It's a perfect mimicry of a legendary Pokemon's cry for help. He swallowed hard. Specifically, it's designed to resonate with the biofrequency of Zygarde. Bonnie gasped, her hand flying to her satchel, from which the green glow was now pulsing with agitation. A Judas key, Ash breathed, the pieces clicking into place with sickening clarity. They weren't just trying to agitate random Pokemon. They were calibrating a weapon. A lure. Something to draw out or manipulate the very order Pokemon of the Kalos region. Before anyone could process the terrifying new scale of the threat, Serena's own holocaster chimed. She looked at the screen, her expression turning to one of disbelief. "It's a priority message from Champion Diantha's office," she said numbly. She read it aloud, her voice strained. "Be advised that the Kalos League is officially reviewing a proposal submitted by the Aegis Foundation, the Aegis Accords, which would implement region-wide restrictions on high-level trainers and the movement of Pokémon deemed regionally significant. A preliminary hearing has been fast-tracked." The room fell silent. They had been so focused on the immediate threat, the debate in the town square, that they hadn't seen the real battlefield. Cashin wasn't just winning over scared ranchers. He was making a play for the entire region's political infrastructure. Ash looked from the horror on Clement's face to the grim news on Serena's screen, and then to the window, where the sun was beginning to set, casting long shadows over the town square. The stage was set. His opponent wasn't just the polite woman, Elara. It was Cashin. It was the Aegis Foundation. It was an idea that was spreading like wildfire. And he had to face it, not with power, but with just the truth. He took Serena's hand, his grip firm and reassuring. "One battle at a time," he said, his voice a low, steady anchor in the swirling chaos. "Let's go win this one first." Chapter 3, The Trial of the Terminus Cave. The town square in Jaune was packed, the fading twilight doing little to cool the heated atmosphere. Aegis Foundation had worked with terrifying speed. A sleek, temporary stage had been erected, flanked by the same massive holographic screens that had broadcast Cashin's message. The white-clad Aegis personnel moved through the crowd, their calm demeanor and polite smiles a stark contrast to the anxious energy of the townspeople. They were masters of optics, turning a public debate into a media spectacle. From the wings of the stage, Ash watched them work. He felt Serena's hand squeeze his, a small, grounding pressure. "Remember," she whispered, her voice a private current in the sea of noise. "Not the monarch. Just Ash." He gave her a quick, grateful smile. Clement stood beside them, nervously adjusting his glasses, his mind clearly racing with the implications of the Zygarde frequency. Bonnie was a little further back, her arms crossed, glaring at the stage as if she could dismantle it with the force of her will alone. Inside her bag, Squishy was a silent, pulsing green light, a beacon of hidden power in the gathering gloom. Elara, Cashin's lieutenant, stepped to the center of the stage. She was a picture of poised reason, her voice amplified by the speakers to carry over the murmuring crowd. "Thank you all for coming," she began. "Tonight is not about blame. It is about finding a path forward. The events of the last few days have shown us that the old ways are failing. We have with us tonight a prominent figure from that old way, a trainer known for his powerful Pokémon and his history of involvement in chaotic events." She gestured towards Ash. It was a subtle but masterful framing. He wasn't a hero, he was a nexus of chaos. As Ash walked onto the stage, Pikachu at his side, a polite but tepid applause rippled through the crowd. He took his place opposite Elara. There were no podiums, just two chairs, designed to look like a conversation, not a confrontation. "Ash Ketchum," Elara began, her tone inquisitive rather than accusatory. "You have traveled the world. You have befriended legendary Pokémon. You command power that few can comprehend. Yet, where you go, destruction often follows. Lava Ridge, Alamos, Machina, the list is long. Can you honestly tell these people, who just saw their livelihoods threatened by rampaging Pokémon, that your way is the safe way?" The bait was laid. She wanted him to get defensive, to list his victories, to justify the destruction as a necessary cost of saving the world. She wanted him to sound like a general talking about acceptable losses. Ash didn't take it. He leaned forward, his posture open and relaxed, and looked not at Elara, but out at the crowd. He saw the rancher whose fences had been smashed. He saw a young girl clutching a frightened Skiddo. He saw their fear. "You're right," Ash said, his voice calm and clear, carrying without the need for shouting. "I've seen a lot of destruction. I've been in the middle of it more times than I can count. And every single time, it was terrifying. It wasn't a statistic. It was real. It was loud, and it was scary. He paused, letting his admission sink in. It wasn't what Alara, or the crowd, expected. But I've seen something else, too, he continued. I saw my Butterfree stand up to a Gyarados to protect me, back when I was just a rookie who didn't know what he was doing. I saw my Pikachu refuse to leave my side in a blizzard that nearly froze us both. I saw a Goodra, who was terrified of fighting, stand in front of me to block a Dragon Pulse that would have, well, that would have been it for me. He wasn't making a speech. He was just talking, telling stories. The way he spoke, simple and direct, drew the crowd in. They weren't hearing from the world monarch. They were hearing from a trainer. One of them. The bond we have with our Pokémon, it's not about power. It's not a weapon to be controlled. It's trust. And trust is a choice. Every day, they choose to trust us. And we have to choose to trust them. He looked at Alara, his gaze steady. What you're offering these people is a world without that choice. A world of cages, even if they're comfortable ones. You want to take away the chaos, but you'll take away the trust, too. You'll take away the love. I don't think that's a world anyone really wants to live in. A murmur went through the crowd. His words, born of simple, heartfelt experience, were cutting through Cashin's cold logic. Alara's smile tightened. She had to pivot. Love is a beautiful sentiment, Mr. Ketchum. But it did not stop the rampage yesterday. Your philosophy offers no practical solutions. The Aegis Foundation does. We offer technology, security, predictability. A wall to keep the monsters out. But the monsters aren't the Pokémon, Ash countered, his voice rising just a fraction, filled with a sudden fire. He pointed to the girl with the Skiddo. Look at her. Is that Skiddo a monster? Or is it her friend? You say you want to build a wall. I say we should be building a bigger table. Your foundation talks about reason. But is it reasonable to fear the very creatures who help us build our cities, grow our food, and heal our sick? Is it reasonable to punish all of them for the actions of a few who were driven mad by a cruelty none of us can yet explain? He stood up, walking to the edge of the stage, closer to the people. Pikachu moved with him, a small, defiant figure of loyalty at his side. I don't have all the answers, Ash said, his voice ringing with sincerity. I don't have a fancy new technology to sell you. All I have is a promise. The same promise I make to every Pokémon I meet. I will not turn my back on you. I will not be afraid of you. And I will find who did this to you, and I will stop them. He wasn't speaking to the crowd anymore. He was speaking to the Skiddo, to the Tauros in their pens, to every Pokémon within earshot. It was the monarch's vow, delivered with a trainer's heart. Silence. A deep, profound silence fell over the square. The townspeople looked from Ash, who stood before them with nothing but his conviction, to Alara, with her perfect smile and her sterile promises. Then, a single person began to clap. It was the rancher. Then another. And another. Soon, the entire square was filled with applause, a wave of support that washed over the stage and crashed against the Aegis Foundation's wall of logic. Alara's composure finally broke. A flash of cold fury crossed her face before she masked it with a polite nod. A very emotional appeal, she said, her voice tight. Thank you for your time, Mr. Ketchum. She turned and strode off the stage, her team already beginning to pack up their equipment, their retreat as swift and efficient as their arrival. They had lost the battle for public opinion. As Ash rejoined his friends, Serena threw her arms around him, her hug fierce and proud. That was perfect, she whispered. You told me what to say, he said, his voice rough with emotion. No, she corrected, pulling back to look at him, her eyes shining. I just reminded you what you already knew. But their victory was cut short by Clement, who was staring at his hollow caster, his face pale. "Ash, the Judas key," he said, his voice trembling. "It's not just a lure. The frequency, it's layered. There's a carrier wave. It's designed to resonate with geological formations that have high concentrations of infinity energy." The pieces slammed into place in Ash's mind. The Zygarde mimicry. The energy resonance. "Terminus cave," Ash and Serena said in unison. Bonnie's head snapped up. "Squishy can feel it," she cried. "A wrongness. Deep in the earth. It's getting stronger." Clement's fingers were flying across his screen. "The cave is a known nexus for the planet's energy lines, the same lines Zygarde protects. If they're targeting the cave, they're not trying to capture Zygarde. They're trying to tap the power line," Ash finished, a cold dread seeping into him. "The Judas key isn't just a lure for Zygarde. It's a drill. They're using its frequency to bore into the heart of Kalos, to steal its life force." "For what?" Serena asked, her face grim. "A power source," Ash said, the full scale of Kashin's ambition finally becoming clear. "A weapon. Something big." He looked to the east, towards the distant mountains where the cave lay hidden. They had won the debate, but it was just a diversion. The real attack was already underway. "We have to go. Now," Ash commanded. "Clement, can you get us transport?" "I have something better," Clement said, a spark of his old, inventive fire in his eyes. He pulled a device from his pack. The Clementic Cruiser Mark II. A high-speed, all-terrain hovercraft. There may be some minor performance quirks, but it should get us there in a fraction of the time. "It's better than walking," Ash said, already moving. "Let's go." They raced from the square, leaving the cheering crowd behind, the sweet taste of a minor victory already turning to ash in their mouths. They were in a race against an enemy who was always 2 steps ahead, an enemy who sought to drain the very lifeblood of the world for their own dark purpose. The Clementic Cruiser Mark II, a somewhat clumsy-looking silver pod, shot through the Kalosian wilderness at a terrifying speed. True to Clement's word, there were quirks. The inertial dampener seemed to work on a slight delay, causing them to lurch violently with every turn, and the heating unit fluctuated between Arctic cold and volcanic hot. But it was fast. As they flew, Clement, braced against a console, brought up a map of the region. Aegis has a political advantage, a technological advantage, and a strategic advantage, he analyzed, the words grim. They're using public sentiment as a smokescreen for a resource grab. It's a classic pincer movement. So we hit them where they don't expect it, Ash said, his gaze fixed on the mountains looming ahead. A direct assault. They'll be waiting for us, Serena countered, her mind already working through the strategic possibilities. They know we've figured it out. This won't be a stealth mission. It will be a siege. She looked at Bonnie. How is Squishy? Bonnie had the small, green Zygarde core out of her bag now. It was pulsing with a distressed, rapid green light. He's scared, she said, her voice small. And angry. He says the earth is screaming. The word sent a shiver down Ash's spine. He reached out with his aura, trying to get a sense of what lay ahead. The land itself felt sick. A deep, discordant thrum emanated from the direction of the cave, a foul harmony to the clean, natural energy of the planet. And mixed with it was the cold, sterile signature of Aegis technology. Lots of it. As they cleared a ridge, they saw it. The entrance to Terminus Cave was transformed. What was once a natural opening in the mountainside was now the heart of a massive industrial operation. Floodlights cut through the darkness. Prefabricated Aegis structures had been erected, and a huge, complex drilling apparatus was positioned over the cave mouth, its central bore pulsing with a sickening green-black energy as it descended into the earth. Aegis personnel and armored vehicles swarmed the area. But that wasn't what made Ash's breath catch in his throat. Standing guard at the perimeter, silhouetted against the harsh lights, was a figure he knew all too well. Tall, imposing, with a black coat and a fiery mega stone glistening on his wrist. And beside him, a Charizard whose power felt like a sleeping volcano. "Alan," Ash breathed. "What's he doing here?" Serena gasped. "Is he with them?" "No," Ash said instantly, his focus sharpening. "Look. He's not with them. He's watching them." As if sensing their approach, Alan turned. His gaze met the oncoming hovercraft, and a moment later, his Charizard let out a roar that was both a challenge and a warning. Clement brought the cruiser in for a bumpy landing a safe distance away. The moment the ramp lowered, Ash was out, Pikachu on his shoulder, his eyes locked on his old rival. Alan strode forward to meet him, his expression unreadable, his hand resting near the key stone on his wrist. "Ash Ketchum," Alan said, his voice a low growl. "I should have known you'd be at the center of this. What is this power I feel from you? It's like Lyssandra's ambition, given form. Are you here to claim this energy for yourself?" The accusation, the deep-seated suspicion born from Alan's own painful past, hung between them. "I'm here to stop them, Alan," Ash said, his voice level, betraying no defensiveness. "The same as you." Alan's eyes narrowed. "I'm here on behalf of Professor Sycamore. We detected the energy spike an hour ago. I came to investigate the source of this desecration." "It's a group called the Aegis Foundation," Serena explained, stepping up beside Ash. "They're trying to siphon the infinity energy from the cave." Before Alan could respond, the ground shook. A klaxon blared from the Aegis encampment. The drill, which had been humming, now pulsed with a violent surge of power. A geyser of raw, green energy erupted from the bore hole, lashing out and vaporizing a nearby boulder. From one of the prefab buildings, a woman emerged. It was Elara. But the polite, smiling mask was gone. Her face was a mask of cold fury. She was flanked by trainers in tactical gear, and behind her stomped a Pokémon that made the ground tremble, a massive Tyranitar, its body encased in sleek, black armor that crackled with sophisticated technology. The monarch and the penitent knight, Elara sneered, her voice amplified and distorted by her helmet. "An unexpected reunion. No matter. You are too late. The Geocore extraction is nearly complete." She pointed a gauntlet hand at them. "Do not let them interfere." The Aegis trainers sent out their Pokémon, a swarm of powerful, disciplined creatures. Sizers, Agrons, Bisharps. A cold, metallic army. Alan didn't hesitate. "This is my fight, too," he growled, more to himself than to Ash. He tapped the key stone on his wrist. "Charizard, let's show them our full power. Mega Evolve." A storm of brilliant energy engulfed his Charizard, reshaping it. When the light faded, Mega Charizard X stood there, its black and blue form radiating immense power, blue flames licking from the sides of its mouth. "Ash, the drill is the primary target." Clement yelled from the hovercraft, where he was already deploying a set of smaller, remote-controlled devices. "If we can overload its power systems, we might be able to trigger a feedback loop. Serena, you, Bonnie, get to cover and coordinate." Ash commanded, his mind instantly shifting into battle mode. "Let me know where the biggest threats are." "On it." Serena replied, her eyes already scanning the battlefield, her performer's sense for timing and positioning now a tactical asset. She drew a pokeball. "Sylveon, let's go. Use your feelers to give us eyes on the whole field." Sylveon's ribbons unfurled, not for a performance, but as a living sensor array, feeding Serena information that she relayed through her holocaster. The battle erupted. It was a whirlwind of controlled chaos. Mega Charizard X was a force of nature, blasting through the Aegis lines with dragon claws and blue-flamed flare blitzes. Alan fought with a grim, focused intensity, a man desperate to atone for his past by protecting Kalos's future. But Ash was something else entirely. He wasn't just commanding his Pokémon. He was connected to them. Pikachu, Volt Tackle, left flank. Greninja, Water. Shuriken, break their formation. Sceptile, Leaf Blade, cover Greninja's approach. He didn't shout. His commands were calm, rapid fire, almost telepathic. His Pokémon moved as a single, cohesive unit, their synergy flawless. Pikachu became a bolt of living lightning, weaving through attacks that should have been unavoidable. Greninja moved like a shadow, its water shurikens disabling enemy Pokémon with surgical precision. Sceptile was a green blur, its arm blades clashing against scissor pincers with blinding speed. Ash moved with them, not fighting himself, but a conductor at the heart of an orchestra of battle. He raised a hand, and a shimmering blue shield of aura flared to life, deflecting a stray hyper beam that would have hit Clement's hovercraft. He saw a Noivern he'd called out falter in midair, its wing clipped by a rock slide. Ash didn't recall it. He simply reached out, and a stream of revitalizing aura flowed from his hand to the Pokémon, mending the injury just enough for it to stay in the fight. Alan, in the midst of his own furious battle, saw it. He saw Ash's impossible speed, the way his Pokémon anticipated his commands before he spoke them, the casual, reality-bending way he manipulated the energy of the battlefield. This wasn't the power of a keystone. This was something far more fundamental. He finally understood. This wasn't Lyssandra's ambition. It was the world itself, fighting back through its chosen champion. The suspicion in his eyes was replaced by a dawning, grudging respect. Serena, status on the Tyranitar. Ash called out, his eyes on the armored behemoth that was methodically tearing its way toward the drill's control center, swatting aside their attacks with contemptuous ease. Its armor is redirecting our special attacks. Serena's voice came back, strained but clear. And its physical power is off the charts. It's like a walking fortress. A fortress with a power source, Clement's voice added. Ash, I'm reading a massive energy signature from its chest plate. It's powering the armor. If you can disrupt it, you might be able to shut it down. Got it, Ash said. He met Alan's eyes across the battlefield. A silent understanding passed between them. They both nodded. Charizard, blast burn. Full power. Alan roared. Pikachu, 10 million volt thunderbolt. Now. Ash commanded. The two attacks, one of searing blue fire, the other a rainbow-hued storm of pure lightning, converged on the armored Tyranitar. The resulting explosion shook the mountain. But when the smoke cleared, the Tyranitar was still standing, its armor scorched and cracked, but functional. It let out a defiant roar. It's not enough. Alan grunted, his Charizard panting from the exertion. Then we go again, Ash said, his voice dangerously quiet. He took a step forward, his own aura flaring to life around him, a visible, shimmering blue flame. He held up a hand, and his Z-Power ring, a gift from the Alolan Guardians, blazed with light. Pikachu. We're all in. Pikachu leaped from his shoulder, landing in front of him, its body crackling with an almost unbearable amount of power, fed directly by Ash's own life force. But before he could unleash the Z-move, Elara, seeing her trump card about to fall, gave a final, desperate order from the control building. The extraction is complete. Detach the Geocore and pull back. Now. With a deafening groan, the massive drill disengaged from the earth. A spherical container, glowing with a captured, furious green energy, was lifted from the bore hole. The Geocore. Aegis's forces didn't retreat. They collapsed, their disciplined lines breaking as they scrambled for their transports, their only goal now to protect the core as it was loaded onto a heavy-duty cargo craft. They're getting away. Bonnie cried out. We can't let them take that. Alan yelled, urging his Charizard forward. But Elara had one last card to play. She slammed a button on her console. Overload the drill's capacitor. Scorch this mountain. The main drill, its primary purpose fulfilled, began to glow an angry red. A high-pitched whine filled the air. "It's going to blow!" Clement shouted. "The explosion will destabilize the entire cave system. The whole mountain could come down." Ash was faced with an impossible choice. Pursue the stolen geocore, or save the mountain and everyone on it. There was no choice. "Alan, with me," he yelled. He closed his eyes, drawing on every ounce of power he had. The blue flame of his aura erupted around him, engulfing both him and Pikachu. He pointed not at the escaping ship, but at the overloading drill. "Greninja, Sceptile, Noivern. Everything you've got. Aim for the central capacitor." His 3 Pokémon unleashed a torrent of power, Water Shuriken, Solar Beam, and Boom Burst, all striking the same point. Alan, understanding instantly, directed his Mega Charizard X to add its own blast burn to the assault. The combined attack slammed into the drill, but the overload was too powerful. The red glow intensified. "It's not enough!" Clement yelled in panic. Ash gritted his teeth. He took a step forward, thrusting both hands out in front of him. "More," he roared, and the aura surrounding him surged forward, a tidal wave of pure energy, wrapping around the combined attacks of his Pokémon and Alan's Charizard, amplifying them, focusing them into a single, devastating lance of power. The lance struck the drill. For a moment, there was a silent, blinding flash of white light. Then, a concussive boom that was felt more than heard, as the overload was forced back on itself. The drill didn't explode outwards. It imploded, collapsing into a heap of twisted, smoking metal. The threat was neutralized. The mountain was safe. But the Aegis cargo ship, carrying the stolen heart of Kalos, was now just a distant speck in the night sky. Ash fell to one knee, panting, the immense expenditure of aura leaving him drained. Pikachu rushed to his side, nudging him with concern. The blue flame around him faded, leaving only the cold mountain air. They had won the battle. But Aegis had secured their prize. Alan recalled his Charizard, the Mega Evolution fading. He walked over to Ash, his face a mixture of awe, exhaustion, and a newfound, profound respect. He looked at the imploded drill, then back at Ash. The suspicion was completely gone, replaced by a grim understanding of the power he had just witnessed. "They took it," Alan said, his voice rough. "The energy, the geocore." Ash looked up, his eyes meeting Alan's. "I know." He pushed himself to his feet, his body aching but his will unbroken. "But now we know what they're building. And we know they can be beaten." Alan stared at him for a long moment, then gave a single, sharp nod. He held out a hand. "Lysandra tried to use the power of a god to destroy the world," Alan said, his voice filled with the weight of his past. "Kashan is trying to steal the power of the world to control it. They are two sides of the same corrupt coin." He looked Ash straight in the eye. "My power is yours to command. I will not stand by and let Kalos fall again." Ash took his hand, their grip firm. A rivalry had just been reforged into a powerful, crucial alliance. They had lost the geocore, but they had gained something just as valuable. United, they stood against the coming storm, the silent vow of two of the world's most powerful trainers sealing a pact under the wounded gaze of the Kalosian moon. Chapter 4, The Castle of Vows. The journey back to Lumio City was a somber, silent affair. The adrenaline of the battle had faded, leaving behind the bitter taste of a strategic defeat and the heavy weight of what was to come. The Clemantic cruiser, for all its speed, felt unnervingly slow. Each kilometer it crossed a testament to the distance the Aegis cargo ship had put between them and the stolen geocore. Ash sat staring out at the blurred landscape, his body aching from the massive expenditure of aura. He had pushed himself to a limit he hadn't touched since his final battle for the Monarch title. The memory of the imploding drill, the silent, violent collapse of Aegis technology under the force of his focused will, was a grim reminder of the power he wielded. But it was the image of the escaping cargo ship, a fading star of stolen hope, that haunted him. Alan sat opposite him, his arms crossed, his gaze lost in the dark patterns on the floor. He hadn't spoken much since his pledge at the cave. He was a man wrestling with his own history, seeing the echoes of Lyssandra's fall in Cassion's rise. But this time, he had chosen his side from the outset. The doubt that had once clouded his features was gone, replaced by a sharp, cutting resolve. Serena moved between them, a quiet, reassuring presence. She handed Ash a canteen of water, her fingers brushing his. The simple touch was an anchor, pulling him from the depths of his brooding. He met her eyes, and in their depths, he saw not pity, but a shared strength. She wasn't just comforting him, she was shouldering the burden with him. "We may have lost the core," she said softly, her voice just for him, "but we learned what they're capable of. We forced their hand. That's a victory in its own right." "It doesn't feel like one," he admitted, his voice rough. "Victories rarely do, in the middle of a war," she replied, her wisdom echoing a maturity forged in the spotlight of her own reign. It was Clement who finally broke the heavy silence. His console, linked to the Prism Tower's mainframes, chirped with an incoming message. "It's from Champion Diantha," he announced, his tone grave. "She's calling an emergency summit. Effective immediately. She wants us at the League headquarters in Lumios Tower." "The Aegis Accords," Alan spat, the words like a bad taste in his mouth. "They're making their move. They have the geocore," Ash reasoned, the pieces falling into place. "They have the one thing everyone is afraid of, a weapon capable of manipulating legendary energy. Now they'll use that fear to push their political agenda. They'll offer to manage the threat they created." "It's brilliant," Clement murmured with a grudging respect. "And terrifying." Lumios Tower, the gleaming spire that housed the Kalos League's official chambers, felt less like a beacon of hope and more like a cage. The air within was thick with tension and the low murmur of politicians and aides speaking in hushed, urgent tones. The news of the incident at Terminus Cave had broken, but Aegis had spun the narrative with breathtaking speed. The official story was that a rogue energy pocket had destabilized, and the Aegis Foundation, acting on a tip from their advanced seismic sensors, had bravely intervened to contain the disaster, securing a dangerous energy source at great personal risk. They were not thieves, they were heroes. Ash, Serena, Alan, and Clement were ushered into Champion Diantha's private office. The room, usually a place of serene elegance, was in a state of organized chaos. Maps were spread across the large oak desk, aides hurried in and out with documents, and in the center of it all stood Diantha, her usual radiant grace replaced by a visible, weary strain. Her garde-of-war stood silently at her side, its posture mirroring its trainer's tension. "Thank you for coming," Diantha said, her voice tight. She dismissed her aides with a wave of her hand, leaving only the 5 of them and her Pokémon in the room. "The situation is untenable." She gestured to a large screen on the wall, which displayed the draft of the Aegis Accords. The language was dry, legalistic, but the implications were horrifying. It called for the mandatory registration of all Pokémon capable of Mega Evolution. It proposed the creation of a new governing body, the Aegis Commission, to be chaired by Cassion, with the authority to restrict the movement of regionally significant Pokémon, a vague term that could apply to anything from a champion's ace to a wild Snorlax blocking a road. It gave the Commission the power to neutralize threats posed by legendary or pseudo-legendary Pokémon. It was a legal framework for a dictatorship. "They presented this to the League Assembly this morning," Diantha explained, her voice laced with frustration. "They used the Terminus Cave incident as their primary evidence. They're claiming the geocore is unstable and that only their technology can safely contain it. They have painted themselves as the saviors of Kalos, and anyone who opposes them is painted as a reckless traditionalist willing to gamble with the lives of citizens. And the Assembly is buying it?" Alan asked, his voice sharp with disbelief. "They're terrified," Diantha replied, sinking into her chair. "Cassion is a master of manipulation. He's not demanding power, he's having it handed to him by people who are desperate for security. My hands are tied. I am the champion, but I am not a monarch. I cannot veto the will of the assembly. If they vote to ratify these accords, I will be legally bound to enforce them. Ash felt the walls of the political trap closing in. They couldn't expose Aegis without revealing the geocore was stolen, which would cause a panic and likely be dismissed as sour grapes. They couldn't fight them head-on without playing into the narrative that they were the agents of chaos. So we lose, Alan said, his voice flat. No, a voice said, clear and firm. All eyes turned to Serena. She was standing by the large window, looking down at the city sprawling below. Her reflection showed a woman whose expression was calm, thoughtful, and utterly resolute. We've been trying to fight Cashin on his terms, she said, turning to face them. In the back rooms, on his stage, at his chosen battlefields. We're trying to counter his logic with our own. But he will always be better at that game. He writes the rules. She took a deep breath. So, we stop playing. What are you suggesting, Serena? Diantha asked, leaning forward with interest. He's using fear to control the narrative, Serena said, her eyes alight with an idea. We need to give people something stronger than fear. We need to give them hope. She looked directly at Diantha. Your Majesty, I would like to request the use of the Parfum Palace. For a performance. Clement looked confused. A performance? Serena, with all due respect, I don't think now is the time for, it's the perfect time, Ash interjected, understanding instantly where she was going. He saw the spark in her eye, the same one he'd seen before her masterclass victory. She wasn't retreating into her art, she was weaponizing it. Not a royal performance, Serena clarified, her voice gaining strength. Not as the Kalos queen. I'll bill it as a free event. For the people of Kalos. From a citizen of Kalos. Her gaze swept across the room, full of passion. Cashin's message is that the bond between humans and Pokemon is a weakness, a liability. I will get on the biggest stage in Kalos, and I will show them, not tell them, that it is our greatest strength. I will tell them a story. Our story. A story of adventure, of trust, of love. I will remind them of what it feels like to believe in that bond, and I will make that feeling more real and more powerful than the fear Cashin is selling. Diantha stared at her, a slow smile spreading across her face, the first genuine smile she'd shown all day. The weary champion was replaced by the shrewd, world-class actress who understood the power of a stage better than anyone. That, Diantha said, her voice filled with admiration, is a brilliant move. It sidesteps the political debate entirely and takes the fight to a battlefield of emotion and culture. He can't argue against a feeling. Consider the Parfum Palace yours. My office will handle the logistics. We'll frame it as a concert for Kalos unity. A spark of hope ignited in the room. It was a daring, unexpected strategy, a classic Serena move, elegant, empathetic, and aimed at the heart. While Diantha's aides began making frantic calls, the group huddled together. This will buy us time, Alan said, but it won't stop them. They still have the geocore. Then we need to find out what they're building, Clement said, his fingers already typing on his console. The energy signature of the geocore is unique. If I can create a resonance scanner tuned to that specific frequency, we might be able to track it. Do it, Ash said. He then turned to Serena, his expression a mixture of awe and concern. The entire weight of public opinion will be on your shoulders. Are you sure you can do this? Serena met his gaze, her own unwavering. I've never been more sure of anything in my life, she said. She reached out and took his hand. Besides, I'll have the best inspiration. The next 2 days were a blur of controlled frenzy. While Clement worked feverishly in his lab, tuning his scanner, and Alan used his connections to gather intelligence on Aegis's movements, Serena threw herself into creating her performance. Ash became her silent partner. He didn't offer advice on choreography or music, that was her domain. Instead, he was simply there. He watched her work for hours in the practice studios of Lumiose Tower, a quiet, steady presence in the corner of the room. He saw the sheer discipline it took, the endless repetition to perfect a single movement, the deep, nonverbal communication she had with her Delphox, Pangoro, and Sylvian. He watched her push herself to the point of exhaustion, only to get up and do it again, driven by a fierce, protective love for her home region. He saw the doubt creep in late at night, when she would stare at a sequence, wondering if it was good enough, if it was strong enough to turn the tide. In those moments, he wouldn't say anything. He would just bring her a cup of tea, or sit with her in the quiet, his presence a silent statement, "You are not alone." He was her anchor, and she was his inspiration. Watching her, he was reminded that strength came in many forms. His was the strength of a thunderbolt, a direct and overwhelming force. Hers was the strength of the tide, a relentless, elemental power that could reshape coastlines with its persistence. The night of the performance arrived. The grounds of the Parfum Palace were flooded with people. Tens of thousands had come from all over Kalos. The event was being broadcast live across the region. The air was thick with a nervous, expectant energy. They were a people caught between fear and hope, and they had come here tonight looking for a reason to believe in the latter. Backstage, Serena was a whirlwind of focused energy, giving last-minute instructions to her team, her face illuminated by the glow of the stage lights. She wore a simple, elegant white dress that flowed like water when she moved. She looked ethereal, every inch the queen. Ash found her in a quiet alcove just moments before she was due to go on. "You ready?" he asked softly. She turned to him, her eyes bright with a mixture of nerves and fierce determination. "I have to be." He reached out, his hand gently cupping her cheek. "You don't have to carry this all by yourself, you know." "I'm not," she said, leaning into his touch. "You're here." They stood there for a long moment, the roar of the crowd a distant ocean. The unspoken feelings that had been simmering between them since his arrival, the words he had been about to say in her office before the world had intervened, rose to the surface. The battle, the politics, the impending doom, it all faded away, leaving only the two of them. "Serena," he began, his voice barely a whisper. The stage manager's call broke the spell. "Your Majesty, 2 minutes." Serena's shoulders slumped for a fraction of a second. Another moment stolen. She pulled back, but her eyes never left his. "After this," she said, a promise in her voice. "When this is over." She turned and walked towards the stage, a lone figure walking into a sea of light. Ash watched her go, a fierce swell of pride and something far deeper churning in his chest. The performance began. It was not like any Pokémon showcase or contest Ash had ever seen. It was a symphony of movement, light, and emotion. It was a story. It started in darkness, with Serena alone on the stage, representing a world without Pokémon. Then, one by one, her partners emerged, and with them, color and music. The performance told the story of a journey, of meeting new friends, of facing challenges, of falling down and getting back up. Pangoro's powerful, unshakable steps represented strength and loyalty. Sylvian's ribbons were the threads of connection, weaving them all together. And Delphox, with its mystical fire, was the spark of inspiration, the magic of the bond itself. There was a sequence that depicted a battle, not as a brutal clash, but as a dance of trust and synergy. There was a moment that portrayed loss, the stage bathed in a sorrowful blue light as Serena and her Pokémon huddled together, sharing their grief. But it always returned to joy, to reunion, to the unshakable truth that they were stronger together. Serena didn't say a single word. She didn't have to. Her body, her expression, her connection with her Pokémon, it was a universal language. Ash watched, mesmerized, from the wings. He saw his own journey reflected in her art. He saw their journey. He saw the promise of a shared future. For the finale, Delphox raised its branch, summoning not a fiery blossom, but a warm, golden light that expanded from the center of the stage, washing over the performers, the audience, the entire palace grounds. It felt like a sunrise, a physical manifestation of hope. As the light reached its peak, Serena and her Pokémon struck a final pose, not one of victory, but one of quiet, unbreakable unity. For a full 10 seconds after the music faded, the crowd was silent, utterly captivated. Then, the applause erupted. It wasn't just polite clapping, it was a roar. A thunderous, cathartic release of every fear and anxiety they had been holding. It was a sound of a people remembering who they were. In that moment, Cassion's Aegis Accords, with their cold logic and sterile promises, felt like a distant, irrelevant dream. Serena had not just won their hearts, she had given them back to themselves. Hours later, the crowds had dispersed, leaving the grounds of the Parfum Palace quiet and serene under the moonlight. The adrenaline had faded, and a peaceful exhaustion had settled over Serena. She had done it. She had turned the tide. Ash found her not backstage, but in the palace's famous gardens, by the edge of the large, circular reflection pool. She had taken off her shoes and was dipping her feet in the cool water, her white dress shimmering like moonlight. He walked over and sat down beside her on the stone edge, the silence between them comfortable, familiar. "I've seen you perform 100 times," he said, his voice soft in the quiet night. "I've never seen anything like that. You changed the world tonight, Serena." She looked at him, a tired but happy smile on her face. "I just reminded them of a story they already knew. The story you taught me." He shook his head. "You did that all on your own." He looked at her, at the way the moonlight caught in her hair, the way her eyes reflected the stars in the pool. All the turmoil, the battles, the weight of his title, it all seemed to fall away. Here, with her, he wasn't the world monarch. He was just Ash. And he was finally home. He took a deep breath, gathering the courage he had been building for years. "Serena," he said, his voice clear and steady, all traces of the uncertain boy gone. "We keep getting interrupted. The world keeps getting in the way. I'm tired of it." She turned to face him fully, her expression expectant, her heart pounding in her chest. "I've spent my whole life on a journey," he went on, his gaze never leaving hers. "Chasing one horizon after another. And it was a great adventure. But it wasn't the destination that mattered. It was who I was with. And when the journey got lonely, when I reached the top and felt more alone than ever, it was always your face I saw. Your voice I heard telling me to never give up." He reached into his pocket. His hand was trembling slightly. It was more nerve-wracking than facing down Eternatus. "I can face down any threat to this world. I can stand against gods and armies. But the one thing I can't do, the one thing I don't want to do, is face the rest of my life without you by my side." He opened his hand. Resting in his palm was not a ring box, but a small, smooth, gray stone. A stone he had picked up from the path on their first journey together, all those years ago, and had kept in his pocket ever since. It was a simple, unassuming thing, a piece of the road they had walked together. Tucked beside it was a tiny, intricately woven band made from one of Sylvian's ribbons, which he had asked for earlier that day. It wasn't a diamond. It was a promise. "You're my partner, Serena. In everything. You always have been." His voice was thick with emotion. "I love you. Will you marry me?" Tears welled in Serena's eyes, spilling down her cheeks, but her smile was the most brilliant, radiant thing Ash had ever seen. It outshone the moon, the stars, the lights of Lumio City in the distance. She didn't hesitate. She didn't need to think. The answer had been in her heart since she was a little girl lost in a forest. "Yes," she breathed, the word a mix of a laugh and a sob. "Of course, yes." She launched herself into his arms, just as she had in the studio, and he caught her, their lips finally meeting in a kiss that was years in the making. It was a kiss full of longing and relief, of promises kept and a future finally beginning. It wasn't a fairy tale ending. It was the start of their greatest adventure. As he slipped the simple ribbon onto her finger, a new vow was made at the Castle of Vows, a bond far more powerful than any mega stone, a personal, unbreakable alliance against the darkness that was gathering on the horizon. Chapter 5, The Crimson Vow and the Onyx Siege. The world, for a brief, glorious moment, seemed to hold its breath. The news of the world monarch's engagement to the Kalos queen swept across the regions like a cleansing fire, burning away the fear and suspicion that Aegis had so carefully sown. It was a fairy tale made real, a symbol of hope so powerful that the dry, legalistic text of the Aegis Accords withered under its light. The Kalos League Assembly, swayed by the overwhelming shift in public opinion following Serena's performance, quietly shelved the proposal, citing a need for further review. It was a massive political blow to Kashin's agenda, a victory won not with force, but with love. They decided to hold the wedding quickly. It wasn't just about their own impatience to start their lives together, it was a strategic choice. Their union had become a rallying point, and a public celebration would solidify the spirit of unity they had ignited. The location was chosen with care, the all-earth forest, near the base of the Tree of Beginning. It was a place of immense life energy, a sacred nexus of aura that represented the very bond between humans, Pokemon, and the planet itself, a direct, symbolic refutation of everything Kashin stood for. Invitations went out, not just to dignitaries, but to friends. The guest list was a history of Ash's entire life. Brock was there, his doctor's coat exchanged for a sharp suit, his expression one of paternal pride. Misty arrived with a mischievous grin, teasing Ash relentlessly before pulling him into a fierce hug, whispering how happy she was for him. Dawn, now a world-renowned coordinator, helped Serena with her dress, their easy laughter echoing through the clearing. Iris and Scylla, May and Max, Tracy, Gladion, Lily, Kiawe, they all came. It was a gathering of champions, rivals, and companions, a testament to the family Ash had built across the world. The day of the ceremony was perfect. The sun filtered through the ancient canopy of the forest, dappling the clearing in golden light. The air hummed with the gentle, powerful aura of the Tree of Beginning. Pokemon of the forest, drawn by the peaceful energy, gathered in the branches and clearings, silent witnesses to the event. Ash stood at the makeshift altar, Pikachu at his side, wearing a formal but simple dark gray suit. He wasn't nervous. He had never felt calmer, more certain, in his entire life. He watched the path, waiting. Then, she appeared. Serena, escorted by her mother, was a vision. Her dress was a masterpiece of flowing white silk, simple and elegant, accented with a sash the color of a fennekin's fur. Her hair was woven with small, white blossoms, and in her hands, she held a bouquet of Grace Dias. But it was the smile on her face, a smile of pure, unadulterated joy directed only at him, that stole the breath from his lungs. As she reached the altar, she handed her bouquet to Dawn and took Ash's hands. Their fingers laced together, a perfect fit. Diantha, officiating the ceremony in her capacity as champion, smiled warmly. "We are gathered here today," she began, her voice resonating through the quiet forest, in a place of life, to celebrate a bond that gives life to us all. A bond of love, of partnership, and of shared destiny. The ceremony was beautiful, filled with personal touches and heartfelt vows they had written themselves. Ash promised to be her anchor in any storm, to always be the one she could lean on. Serena promised to be his compass, to always help him find his way home. They exchanged simple rings, and as Diantha pronounced them husband and wife, a cheer erupted from their assembled friends. Ash looked at Serena, his wife, her eyes sparkling with happy tears. He leaned in and kissed her, a deep, loving kiss that sealed their vow. In that moment, the world was perfect. There were no accords, no geocores, no shadowy foundations. There was only them. It was Pikachu who felt it first. His head snapped up, his ears twitching, a low growl rumbling in his throat. Pika. Ash pulled back from the kiss, his own senses, heightened by the ambient aura of the forest, screaming a warning. The gentle hum of the tree of beginning had been replaced by a discordant, gut-wrenching screech. The sky above the canopy, a perfect blue just moments before, was darkening, turning a sick, metallic gray as if a storm was rolling in with impossible speed. "What is that?" Misty asked, her hand going to her pokeballs. "That's not a natural storm," Brock said, his doctor's eyes scanning the strange clouds. Alan, who had been standing guard at the edge of the clearing, already had his Charizard out, its eyes narrowed at the sky. "Ash," he yelled. "We have company." From the unnatural gray clouds, things began to descend. Dozens of them. They were not Pokémon. They were sleek, black, insectoid mechs, their single red optical sensors glowing with malice. They moved with a silent, terrifying grace, landing on the perimeter of the clearing, surrounding them. On the ground, the forest floor churned as more machines, heavy, quadrupedal units resembling armored Steelix, burrowed up from below. An army of steel and circuitry. Then, a voice, amplified and chillingly familiar, echoed from all directions at once, seeming to come from the very air. "A beautiful ceremony," Cashin's voice mocked, dripping with condescending pity. "A lovely, sentimental display of an outdated ideology. I almost regret having to interrupt it." A massive holographic image of Cashin flickered into existence above the clearing, his face a cold, impassive mask. "But this gathering, it's too perfect an opportunity to pass up. All the pillars of the old world, all the champions of chaos, all in one place." His gaze in the hologram seemed to settle on Ash and Serena. "I offered the world a peaceful transition to a new age of reason. You answered with this, romantic spectacle. You forced my hand. Consider this my counterargument." The siege had begun. There was no panic. Not among this crowd. Years of facing down world-ending threats had forged them into something more than just trainers. They were soldiers in a war they hadn't known they were fighting. "Get the non-combatants back towards the tree," Ash commanded, his voice cutting through the shock. He ripped off his suit jacket, his movements sharp and precise. Serena, in perfect sync, handed her bouquet to her mother without looking. "Go," she ordered gently. "We'll handle this." Her wedding dress, a symbol of peace, now looked like the gown of a warrior queen. The Aegis mechs opened fire. Not with explosives, but with beams of crackling energy designed to disable, to capture. "Pikachu, Thunderbolt!" Ash roared. Pikachu leaped into the air, a storm of lightning erupting from his small body, incinerating the first wave of aerial drones. Around them, a symphony of battle erupted. "Gyarados, Hydro Pump!" Misty yelled, her water behemoth appearing in a flash of light, unleashing a torrent that smashed a line of ground mechs to pieces. "Blastoise, on me!" Gary Oak shouted, his own powerhouse Pokémon unleashing a volley of cannon fire. "Dragonite, Hyper Beam!" Iris commanded from the sky. Alan's Mega Charizard X was a black and blue whirlwind of draconic fury, tearing through the invaders. Diantha's Gardevoir moved with impossible grace, creating psychic barriers that deflected incoming fire, protecting the fleeing guests. Ash and Serena stood back-to-back in the center of the clearing, the epicenter of the storm. They moved as one mind, a seamless unit forged in trust and love. "Pangoro, hammer arm on those heavy units," Serena directed, her voice clear and sharp. "Delphox, mystical fire, create a defensive wall." A curtain of psychic flame erupted, giving them precious seconds of breathing room. Ash used the opening. Infernape, Flare Blitz. Sceptile, Leaf Storm. His two powerhouses exploded into action, a blur of fire and fury, a storm of razor-sharp leaves. They were a testament to Ash's unique training style, fast, powerful, and overwhelmingly aggressive. But the Aegis forces were relentless. For every mech they destroyed, two more seemed to take its place. They were intelligent, adaptive, learning from every attack. A blast of energy from a ground unit clipped Brock's Blissey, causing it to cry out in pain. They're targeting the support Pokémon. Brock yelled, drawing it back. Their tactics are designed to break our formations. They fight with logic, not passion, Alan grunted, his Charizard taking a heavy blow from a coordinated attack. They don't have weak points. Everything has a weak point, Ash countered, his eyes scanning the battlefield, his mind processing 1,000 points of data at once. His aura sense was screaming, not just with the cold energy of the mechs, but with a new, colossal signature that was descending from the clouds. The ground shook as something massive landed with a deafening crash just beyond the clearing, felling ancient trees like blades of grass. It rose to its full height, dwarfing even the tree of beginning. It was a mech, but it was unlike the smaller drones. It was a Goliath, a titan of black metal and glowing green circuitry, easily the size of a Groudon. In its chest, pulsing like a monstrous, caged heart, was the Geocore, its stolen energy now powering this colossal engine of destruction. Behold, the pinnacle of reason. Kashin's voice boomed from the Titan speakers. The Archon. A machine built to humble gods. A tool to usher in an age where mankind no longer needs to fear them. The Archon raised a massive arm, and a cannon formed, glowing with the raw, green energy of the Geocore. It fired. A beam of pure, focused infinity energy tore through the forest, aimed directly at the tree of beginning. No! Ash roared. He moved without thinking. He pushed Serena out of the way and threw himself in front of the beam, his hands outstretched. A shield of pure, blue aura erupted from his body, a desperate, instinctive act of protection. The beam slammed into his shield. The power was immense, unimaginable. It felt like trying to hold back the ocean. The ground cracked beneath his feet. The light was blinding, the sound a deafening roar. He couldn't hold it. The power was too great. But he wasn't alone. A wave of pink, psychic energy slammed into the beam from the side, Diantha's Gardevoir adding its power to his. A torrent of water, a blast of fire, a beam of draconic energy, all of the champions, all of his friends, were pouring their Pokémon's power into his shield, trying to deflect the beam. With a final, gargantuan effort, they managed to divert it. The beam sliced upwards, carving a burning scar into the sky before dissipating. Ash fell to his knees, gasping, the feedback from blocking the blast racking his body. The front of his suit was scorched, his arms trembling. Serena was at his side in an instant, her hands on his shoulders. Ash. Are you okay? I'm fine, he gritted out, pushing himself back to his feet, his eyes blazing with a cold fire he hadn't felt in years. He looked at the Archon, at the smirking face of Kashin in the hologram above it. This wasn't a battle anymore. This was an execution. This ends now, Ash said, his voice dangerously low. He turned to Serena. I need you to keep everyone safe. Coordinate the defense. Keep the small fry off me. I'm going to take that thing down. How? She asked, her eyes wide with worry. The Archon seemed invincible. He gave her a look that said trust me. Then he turned to his oldest friend. Pikachu. It's you and me. Like it's always been. Pikachu. Pikachu leaped onto his shoulder, cheeks crackling, his expression a mirror of Ash's own grim determination. Ash closed his eyes for a second, reaching deep inside himself, not just for his own aura, but for the life force of the forest around him, for the shared energy of every friend, every Pokémon who stood with him. The air crackled. The ground hummed. When he opened his eyes, they were glowing with a brilliant blue light. Let's go. He didn't run. He blurred. He moved with a speed that was not human, weaving through the chaos of the battlefield, his Pokémon clearing a path for him as Serena's voice directed them with flawless precision. Pikachu, iron tail on the leg joints. Ash ran up a falling tree, using it as a ramp. He and Pikachu were a single entity. As Ash leaped into the air, Pikachu launched off his shoulder, his tail glowing like hardened steel, slamming into the Archon's knee joint. The massive mech stumbled, its leg buckling. Cashin, his composure finally cracking at this impossible display, directed the Archon's fire. A swarm of missiles erupted from its shoulders, screaming towards Ash. Greninja, Water Shuriken. Ash commanded, not even looking. His ace Pokémon appeared as if from nowhere, a blur of motion, unleashing a storm of shurikens that intercepted every single missile in a series of mid-air explosions. Ash landed on the Archon's bent leg, scrambling up its metallic frame as if it were a mountain. Drones swarmed him, but they were cut down by a combination of Sceptile's Leaf Blade and Misty Starmie's Psychic. He's climbing the Archon. Clement yelled in disbelief from the command post he'd set up. He's insane. Gary added, but his voice was filled with grudging awe. No, Serena said, her eyes fixed on the tiny figure ascending the metal giant. He's Ash. Ash reached the Archon's chest, standing directly before the containment unit that held the Geocore. The raw power pouring off it was suffocating. He could feel the pain of the stolen planetary energy, a screaming agony in his aura. You cannot stop progress, child. Cashin's voice boomed. The Archon's hand, the size of a house, swung around to swat him like a fly. Pikachu. Now. Ash yelled. He held up his arm, his Z-power ring flaring with the combined power of his will and the forest's energy. Pikachu leaped onto the Archon's hand as it swung past, his body glowing with the unmistakable, rainbow-hued power of the 10 million-volt thunderbolt. This is our full power. Ash roared, his voice joining Pikachu's as they performed the Z-move dance in perfect, desperate sync. Pikachu became a comet of pure electrical force, slamming not into the hand, but into the elbow joint of the arm. The Z-move, empowered by Ash's own aura and the sacred energy of the forest, didn't just damage the joint. It vaporized it. The Archon's massive arm detached, crashing to the forest floor with a world-shaking boom. Cashin's hologram flickered, his face a mask of shocked fury. Impossible. Ash wasn't done. He placed his hands on the containment unit of the Geocore. The heat was searing, the energy within was trying to tear him apart. He gritted his teeth, sweat pouring down his face, and poured his own aura into it. Not to destroy it. To connect with it. It's okay, he projected into the raging core. I'm here. Let go. He was trying to soothe the stolen energy, to convince it to stop fighting, to return to the planet. For a moment, the violent green pulsing of the Geocore softened. But Cashin, realizing what he was doing, initiated a desperate gambit. If I can't have it, no one can. Initiating core overload. Alarms blared from the Archon. The Geocore's light turned from green to a blinding, critical white. It was going to explode, an explosion that would wipe the entire forest, and everyone in it, off the face of the planet. Ash, get out of there. Serena screamed, her voice breaking with terror. But Ash didn't move. He closed his eyes, his hands still pressed against the core. He couldn't stop it. But maybe, he could contain it. He drew on everything he had left, pulling energy from the tree of beginning, from the Pokémon, from the very ground beneath his feet. A sphere of brilliant blue aura formed around him, enveloping him and the Geocore. He was going to try and smother the explosion with his own life force. It was a suicide mission. I love you, Serena, he whispered, a single tear tracing a path through the grime on his face. Then, a new energy joined his. A pink, psychic light wrapped around his aura shield, reinforcing it. Gardevoir. Then a wave of draconic power from Alan's Charizard. Then water, fire, grass, from every Pokémon still standing. His friends, his family, they were all pouring their strength, their life, their hope into him. Serena stood on the forest floor, her hands outstretched towards him, her own aura, a soft, rose-gold light that he had never seen before, flowing from her, joining the stream of power. She was giving him everything she was. The geocore exploded. For a moment, there was only white. A silent, world-ending light. The sphere of power, ash at its heart, pulsed once, violently. Then it held. The light collapsed inwards, sucked into the sphere, which then imploded with a sound like shattering glass. The Archon, its power source gone, went dark and silent. It slumped, a dead metal god in the heart of the wounded forest. When the dust settled, ash was gone from its chest. He was lying in a crater on the forest floor, his wedding suit in tatters, his body smoking, unconscious. But he was breathing. Pikachu was curled on his chest, exhausted but alive. The Aegis Mechs, their central command gone, fell dormant. Cashin's hologram was gone. He had retreated, his ultimate weapon destroyed, his army broken. The siege was over. Serena was the first to reach him. She fell to her knees at his side, her hands hovering over him, afraid to touch. His friends gathered around, their faces a mixture of shock, relief, and utter awe. Brock was there in an instant, his medical training taking over. He's alive. His pulse is weak, but he's stable. He's completely drained, he pushed his body past every conceivable limit. Serena choked back a sob, gently brushing the hair from Ash's forehead. He had saved them. He had saved everyone. On his wedding day. She looked at her hand, at the simple ribbon ring he had given her. It was singed, but it was intact. A promise kept. They had won. But the cost was written on the scorched earth of the forest and the still form of the man she loved. This was not just an attack. It was a declaration of total war. And Cashin, though defeated, was still out there. Chapter 6, The Heart of the Machine. The silence that followed the Archon's fall was heavier than any sound. It was a silence filled with the smell of ozone, scorched earth, and the ghost of an explosion that should have vaporized them all. The all-earth forest, a place of vibrant life, was now scarred, a testament to the ferocity of Cashin's hatred. Dormant Aegis Mech stood like onyx statues in a graveyard, their red eyes dark and lifeless. Ash's recovery was slow. For 2 days, he remained unconscious in the medical wing of Lumiose Tower, tended to by Brock and a team of Kalos's best doctors. Serena never left his side. She sat in a chair by his bed, holding his hand, watching the steady rise and fall of his chest. She slept in fits and starts, haunted by the memory of the blinding white light, of the moment she thought she had lost him on the same day she had vowed to keep him forever. Their friends kept a constant, solemn vigil. Diantha had placed the entire area under her personal protection, her Gardevoir a silent, powerful guardian at the door. Alan was a restless storm, pacing the halls, his face a mask of cold fury. He had seen power before, had even been consumed by it, but what he had witnessed Ash do was something else entirely. It was not the power to dominate, but the power to shield. It was the power of a king protecting his people, and it had solidified Alan's loyalty into something unbreakable. On the third day, Ash's eyes fluttered open. The first thing he saw was Serena's face, her expression worn with worry, her beautiful hair uncharacteristically messy. "Hey," he rasped, his voice rough and weak. A tidal wave of relief washed over her, so powerful it made her gasp. Tears she hadn't allowed herself to shed streamed down her face as she leaned forward, pressing her forehead to his. "You idiot," she whispered, her voice breaking. "You absolute, reckless idiot. I love you so much." He managed a weak smile, lifting his free hand to wipe a tear from her cheek. "Part of the vows, wasn't it? In sickness and in health. This goes way beyond sickness," she laughed through her tears. "This is self-sacrificial Oribomb containment. It wasn't in the fine print." The news of his awakening brought the others rushing in. The relief was palpable, but it was quickly replaced by a grim sense of purpose. Cashin has gone to ground, Alan reported, his voice clipped. Aegis has vanished. Their public offices, their outreach centers, all cleared out overnight. It's like they were ghosts. But they're not, Clement said, stepping forward. He looked as if he hadn't slept in days, his eyes red-rimmed but blazing with intellectual fire. He held up his hollow caster, which displayed a complex, swirling energy map. The implosion of the geocore wasn't clean. It left a residue. An isotopic signature. Very faint, but I was able to use the data from the wreckage of the Archon to build a specific filter for it. Aegis technology is powered by a unique energy source, likely derived from their early experiments. I've been scanning the entire Kalos power grid, cross-referencing it with satellite imagery. He zoomed in on a remote section of the Kalos coast, a storm-racked peninsula known for its treacherous cliffs and perpetually gray skies. An old, decommissioned seafort-turned power plant sat there, abandoned for decades. There, Clement said, pointing to a single, pulsing point of light on the map. An anomalous power drain. It's off-grid, completely self-sustained, and it's been carefully shielded to be almost undetectable. But it carries the exact same isotopic signature as the Archon's power cells. His main base, Ash breathed, already trying to sit up, his muscles protesting. The factory. The shipyard. It has to be. It's where they're building their real weapon, Alan finished, his hand clenching into a fist. The Archon was just a prototype. The geocore was just one component. We need to go, Ash said, his voice gaining strength. He swung his legs over the side of the bed, ignoring the wave of dizziness that washed over him. Ash, you're in no condition, Brock started to protest. I'm fine, Ash insisted, though his pale face betrayed the lie. We don't have time. Whatever they're building, they'll be accelerating their timeline after the failure at the wedding. We have to hit them now, while they're on the back foot. Serena put a hand on his chest, gently pushing him back. He's right, she said, her voice calm but firm. But you can't go in like a one-man army. Not this time. You almost died. We can't afford to lose you. She looked at the others, her gaze sharp and commanding. This can't be a full frontal assault. The Archon was a siege weapon. Their base will be a fortress. We need to be smarter. We need to go in small, fast, and quiet. An infiltration mission, Clement nodded. Not to destroy the base, but to gather intelligence on their ultimate weapon. And if possible, to disable it. I'm going, Alan stated. It wasn't a question. I have to go, Clement said. I'm the only one who can interface with their systems. Ash looked at Serena, a silent question in his eyes. He wanted her safe, miles away from this. But he knew what her answer would be. I'm going with you, she said, leaving no room for argument. My Pokemon and I can create diversions, run interference. And you need a leader who can think on her feet when the plan inevitably goes sideways. You're the sword, Ash. I'm the strategist. We do this together. He saw the iron resolve in her eyes, the same look she'd had before her performance at the Parfum Palace. She was right. He couldn't do this without her. He nodded. Okay. The four of us. We leave at dusk. The coastal facility was even more formidable than they had imagined. It clung to the black cliffs like a metallic parasite, constantly battered by wind and sea spray. The old power plant had been repurposed, expanded, and fortified. Automated turrets scanned the churning gray waters, and the entire structure hummed with a contained, predatory power. They made their approach by sea, using Clement's modified submersible, a silent, fish-shaped vessel that slipped through the waves undetected. They surfaced in a lightless sea cave beneath the facility, the air cold and damp. The main security network is routed through this substation, Clement whispered, pointing his scanner at a thick bundle of armored cables running up the rock face. If I can slice in here, I can create a blind spot for us, a window of about 10 minutes to get inside. As Clement worked, his fingers flying over a portable console, Ash took a moment to center himself. His body still ached, his aura reserves were low, a pale flicker compared to their usual bonfire. He couldn't rely on overwhelming power this time. He would have to rely on his instincts, his Pokémon, and his team. Windows open, Clement hissed. Go, go, go. They moved with practiced speed. Alan used his Sceptile's leaf blade to carve handholds into the sheer cliff face, and they ascended in silence, the roaring sea masking any noise they made. They slipped through an unguarded maintenance hatch, finding themselves in a cold, sterile corridor that pulsed with a faint, green light. The air was sterile, smelling of cleansed air and hot metal. It was the heart of the machine. The inside of the facility was a disorienting labyrinth of white walls, humming conduits, and automated security drones that patrolled with unnerving precision. It was less a base and more a fanatically clean temple dedicated to science devoid of a soul. I'm in their internal network, Clement murmured, his eyes glued to his datapad. Their security is incredible. Layered AI, counter-intrusion protocols, it's beautiful, in a terrifying way. Can you guide us? Serena asked, her voice low. I can try, he replied. The main construction bay seems to be at the central core, several levels down. But, wait. There's something else. A high-energy signature, separate from the main project. In the sublevels. It's biological. Their path was a tense exercise in stealth. They flattened themselves into alcoves as patrol drones floated past, their red optical sensors sweeping the corridors. At one point, a security door hissed shut in front of them, an alarm about to sound. Before it could, Alansbus harp moved like a shadow, its metal claws slicing through the locking mechanism with a single, silent snip. As they descended deeper, the sterile atmosphere began to change. A low, almost subsonic hum vibrated through the floor, a sound of mass suffering. The clean air became tinged with something else, a smell of pain and fear. They reached a heavy security door marked, Biogeneration Unit 03. Clement's face went pale as he bypassed the lock. According to the schematics, this is a power station. The door hissed open, and the source of the smell and the sound hit them with the force of a physical blow. The room was vast, circular, and filled with hundreds of transparent containment pods. Inside each pod was a Pokémon. Voltorbs, electrodes, magnemites, heliolisks, all floating in a viscous green fluid, their bodies racked with spasms as thick cables siphoned the electrical energy directly from them. Their eyes were wide with a dull, constant agony. This was the unique energy signature Clement had detected. This was the clean power source of the Aegis Foundation. They were literally running their facility on the suffering of captured Pokémon. Serena gasped, her hand flying to her mouth, her eyes filling with horrified tears. Ash felt a surge of white-hot rage, so powerful it made his vision swim. He had seen cruelty before, Team Rocket's schemes, Hunter J's callousness, but this was different. This was cold, calculated, industrialized torture, justified by the name of logic and progress. Cashin, Alan snarled, his voice a low growl of pure venom. He looked like he was ready to level the entire facility, consequences be damned. We can't, Serena said, her voice shaking but firm, grabbing his arm. If we cause a commotion here, we'll never reach the main weapon. We have to keep moving. The words clearly tore at her, but she was right. Ash took a deep, shuddering breath, forcing his rage down, channeling it into a cold, hard resolve. We're not leaving them, he said, his voice deadly quiet. Clement. Find a way to release them. A master control. Something. I'll try, Clement whispered, his face ashen as he plugged his datapad into a nearby terminal. But a mass release could trigger a catastrophic power surge, it could blow the whole facility. Just find it, Ash ordered. We'll deal with the consequences later. They left Clement to his grim work and continued towards the central core, the psychic echo of the Pokémon's suffering following them. They finally reached a large observation deck, a gallery of reinforced glass that looked down into a cavernous construction bay. What they saw stopped them cold. Hanging in the center of the bay, suspended by massive magnetic containment rings, was a terrifyingly beautiful and complex device. It was a spire of interlocking rings, crystalline conductors, and humming circuitry, all aimed at a central, multifaceted lens the size of a small house. It was far larger and more intricate than the weapon on Prism Tower had been. It was easily the size of a city block. Raw, unstable energy arced between its components. This was the Aegis Foundation's endgame. The Null Arcanum, Ash breathed, the name coming to him from a half-forgotten legend about a weapon that could silence the gods. "My god," Alan whispered. "What is it?" "It's a broadcast array," Ash said, his aura sense deciphering its function. "It's not designed to destroy. It's designed to emit a frequency, a wave of energy that will sever the connection. The bond. The bond between humans and Pokémon?" Serena asked, horrified. "Worse," Ash said, a cold dread washing over him as he understood the full, monstrous scope of Kashin's plan. "The bond between the legendary Pokémon and the world itself. The aura lines, the channels of life energy, it will cut them all. It won't just make Pokémon sluggish. It will make them empty. It will turn them into simple animals. It will silence the voice of the planet. He's not trying to build a shield. He's trying to perform a lobotomy on the entire world." Suddenly, the lights on the observation deck flashed red. An alarm blared. "Intruder alert. Sector Gamma. Lockdown initiated." Clement's voice crackled over their communicators. "They found me. I'm locked out of the system. They're converging on my position." On the far side of the observation deck, a heavy blast door opened. A woman strode in, flanked by a squad of Aegis's elite guard. She was a stern-faced scientist with cold, analytical eyes, and a fanatic certainty in her expression. It was the facility's warden, a high-ranking ideologue named Dr. Eris. "The world monarch," Dr. Eris said, her voice devoid of emotion. "Kashin predicted you would be foolish enough to come here. You are a relic, a chaotic variable in a perfectly ordered equation. You will be neutralized." Behind her, her Pokémon appeared, a Metagross, its metallic body polished to a mirror sheen, its cold, psychic eyes glowing with intelligence. "Serena, Alan, get to Clement," Ash commanded, stepping forward. "Help him with the release." "I'll handle this." "Ash, no." Serena cried. "You're not strong enough to fight alone." "I won't be," he said, drawing a Pokeball. "Pikachu is with me." He looked at Dr. Eris, his eyes burning with a righteous fury. He was no longer just a trainer fighting a villain. He was the world's chosen champion, standing in defense of its very soul. "You've heard enough Pokémon today. This ends now." Dr. Eris simply smirked. "Your sentiment is an evolutionary flaw. Metagross, psychic." The battle was brutal and tactical. The Metagross was a psychic supercomputer, predicting Ash's moves, countering them with flawless logic. Pikachu's speed was met with calculated meteor mashes. Greninja's water shurikens were blocked by perfectly timed light screens. Ash was still weakened, his connection to his Pokémon not as seamless, his aura reserves a shallow pool. He was fighting on instinct and grit alone. Meanwhile, Serena and Alan raced through the corridors, battling their way through Aegis guards to reach Clement. They found him pinned down, his back to the biogeneration control room door, his chestnut valiantly holding off a dozen Aegis mechs. "We can't hold them," Clement yelled over the sounds of battle. "But I found it. The master release protocol for the pods. The problem is, it's tied into the primary power grid. If I trigger it, it will cause a feedback loop that will overload every system in this base." It'll be a chain reaction. The whole place will implode in minutes. It will kill everyone inside, Alan said grimly. Including us. Serena's mind raced, processing the impossible choice. Free the Pokemon. And die, or escape and leave them to their fate. There had to be another way. The containment fields, she realized, her eyes widening. Clement, can you hack the containment fields around the Null Arcanum? The magnetic rings? Possibly, why? The feedback loop you mentioned, instead of letting it cascade through the base, can you redirect the entire surge into the magnetic rings? She asked, her plan forming in a flash of brilliance. Clement's eyes lit up. Yes. A directed energy burst. It would supercharge the rings far beyond their tolerance levels. They would collapse, crushing the Null Arcanum under its own magnetic force before the base's main reactor goes critical. It would cause a localized implosion in the bay, but it might give us just enough time to get to the sub and escape. It was an insane gamble, a plan with 1,000 things that could go wrong. But it was their only shot. Do it, Alan said, his Mega Charizard X appearing beside him, ready to clear a path. Back on the observation deck, Ash was on his last legs. Pikachu was bruised and battered, Greninja was panting. The Metagross was barely scratched. You see. Dr. Eris said coolly. Logic always triumphs over sentiment. Your bond is a weakness. Meteor Mash. Finish it. As the Metagross charged, its claws glowing, Ash saw not an enemy, but a victim. A powerful, intelligent Pokemon, its mind twisted to serve a cold, heartless ideology. He wasn't going to win by overpowering it. He had to break the conditioning. He closed his eyes, ignoring the onrushing attack. He reached past his own exhaustion, past the rage, and found a quiet center within himself. He gathered the last dregs of his aura and pushed it forward. Not as an attack. Not as a shield. But as a feeling. He didn't project calm. He projected the raw, unfiltered agony of the hundreds of Pokemon suffering in the labs below. He forced a connection between the Metagross and the biogeneration units. He made it feel what its masters were doing. The Metagross skidded to a halt just inches from Pikachu. Its 4 brains, capable of processing millions of calculations per second, were suddenly flooded with a wave of pure, undiluted suffering. It let out a psychic scream of anguish, clutching its own head. Its cold, logical world shattered, replaced by an empathy it had been trained to suppress. Dr. Eris stared in horror. What have you done? I showed him the truth, Ash said, his voice a ragged whisper. At that moment, the entire facility shuddered violently. A new alarm, 100 times louder and more frantic, began to shriek. Warning! Catastrophic power surge detected in biogeneration. Core containment failure imminent. The lights flickered and died, replaced by the terrifying red glow of the emergency strobes. You've doomed us all, you fool! Eris screamed, her fanatical composure finally breaking, replaced by raw terror. Ash ignored her. He looked at the Metagross, who was now staring at its trainer, its eyes no longer cold, but filled with a profound, sorrowful accusation. He had not just defeated it, he had liberated it. Let's go! Ash yelled into his communicator, recalling his Pokemon and breaking into a dead sprint. Their escape was a frantic, desperate race against time. The facility was tearing itself apart around them. Corridors collapsed, pipes burst, and the remaining Aegis personnel were in a full-blown panic. Serena, Alan, and Clement met him halfway, their faces grim. It's working! Clement shouted as they ran. The main bay is imploding. The Null Arcanum is destroyed. They could hear the groaning tier of metal behind them as the heart of the facility collapsed in on itself. As they reached the sea cave, they could see the main structure above beginning to crumble, chunks of concrete and steel falling into the churning ocean. They piled into the submersible and plunged into the dark water just as the entire cliff face facility gave way, collapsing into the sea in a final, fiery cataclysm. As their small vessel sped away into the darkness, they looked back at the roiling water where the base had been. They had done it. They had destroyed the weapon. They had crippled Aegis. But Ash knew, with a certainty that chilled him to the bone, that this was not the end. They had destroyed the machine, but the man, the idea, was still out there. And Cashin was not the kind of man to accept defeat. He would be back, with a vengeance born of shattered ideology and pure, undiluted hatred. Chapter 7, The Zenith of Defiance. The victory felt hollow, a ghost of triumph that vanished with the morning sun. They had destroyed the null arcanum, but the price was a gnawing uncertainty. They had survived, but the image of the imploding facility, a grave for hundreds of Aegis personnel who had died for Cashin's cold philosophy, was a heavy burden. They had freed the Pokémon in the biogeneration labs, but they had also unleashed a catastrophic environmental disaster on the Kalos coast. The world was safe for now, but the cost was steep, and the silence from Cashin was more terrifying than any threat. They returned to Lumio City not as heroes, but as weary soldiers trudging home from a battle no one else knew had been fought. Diantha, briefed on the full, horrific truth of the Aegis Foundation, used her full authority to classify the incident, burying it under a mountain of official secrecy. The official story was a seismic event leading to the collapse of an old, unstable power plant. It was a necessary lie, but it tasted like ash. A week passed. A tense, suffocating week of waiting for the other shoe to drop. Ash, finally back to full strength, spent his days training with a renewed, almost frantic intensity. He pushed himself and his Pokémon to their limits, the memory of his weakness against Dr. Eris's Metagross a stark reminder that aura alone was not always enough. Serena found him one afternoon in the courtyard of Lumio's tower, locked in a mock battle with Elan. The clash between Ash's Pikachu and Elan's Charizard was a storm of lightning and fire, a breathtaking display of power that felt less like training and more like a desperate attempt to outrun the coming darkness. "He's pushing himself too hard," Serena said quietly, standing beside Clement on the sidelines. "Can you blame him?" Clement replied, his gaze distant. "He feels responsible. For all of it. He's the monarch. He thinks it's his job to carry the weight of the world alone." "He's not alone," Serena murmured, her hand instinctively going to the simple ribbon ring on her finger. The shoe finally dropped not with a bang, but with a quiet, insidious hum. It started in the heart of Lumio City. A strange lethargy fell over the Pokémon in the plazas and parks. A fletchling, normally zipping through the air, sat listlessly on a branch. A group of Furfrou, renowned for their energy, lay down in the middle of a walk, refusing to move. It was subtle at first, easily dismissed as a hot day or a strange mood. But then it grew. Ash was the first to feel it on a deeper level. He was meditating, trying to connect with the flow of aura through the city, when he felt the world go quiet. It was like being suddenly plunged underwater. The vibrant hum of life, the chorus of thousands of Pokémon auras that was the city's heartbeat, was being muffled, dampened, smothered under a thick, invisible blanket. He gasped, stumbling to his feet, a hand pressed to his chest. It felt like his own life force was being siphoned away. "Pika." Pikachu chirped, his movement sluggish, the electric sacs on his cheeks flickering weakly. At the same time, across the city, the Prism Tower began to glow. Not with its usual festive colors, but with a dull, metallic, lifeless gray light that pulsed outwards in slow, concentric rings. A wave of invisible energy, undetectable to most machines, was spreading from the tower, blanketing the city. The null field. "He had another one," Elan snarled, as they gathered in Diantha's office, the scope of the disaster becoming clear. "A smaller one. A backup." "It's not smaller," Clement said, his face a mask of horror as he stared at the readings on his console. "It's more efficient. It's not a prototype anymore. It's a perfected weapon. He's broadcasting from the top of the Prism Tower. He's turned my greatest invention into a weapon against us." The effect on Ash was devastating. His connection to the world's aura, the source of his immense power, was being severed. The vibrant tapestry of life he could normally sense was now a frayed, gray cloth. He could still feel it, but it was distant, like a radio station drowned in static. He was being cut off, isolated. He was becoming mortal again, and the sudden vulnerability was terrifying. Then Kashin's voice hijacked every broadcast in the Kalos region. His face, colder and more resolute than ever, appeared on every holocaster, every public screen. He stood on the observation deck of the Prism Tower, the chaotic, despairing city spread out below him like a prize. People of Kalos, he began, his voice calm, rational, and utterly devoid of empathy. For weeks, you have celebrated a lie. A fairy tale romance. You have placed your faith in relics and emotions. I offered you a future of reason and order. You rejected it. You allowed my work, my vision for a safe world, to be destroyed by a handful of sentimental terrorists. He gestured to the city below, where trainers were now trying in vain to get a response from their listless Pokémon. Panic was beginning to set in. What you are experiencing now is not a punishment, Kashin continued. It is a demonstration. A lesson. This null arcanum field severs the chaotic, unpredictable energy that binds Pokémon to their so-called divine nature. It makes them what they should have been all along, manageable, predictable animals. It is a world of pure reason. A world I will now create. He then delivered his ultimatum. The legendary guardians of our world are the ultimate source of this chaos. They are the wellspring of the instability you fear. I am giving you 24 hours. The leaders of every region will surrender their legendary Pokémon to my custody. They will be humanely neutralized, their power permanently severed from this world. If you refuse, I will expand the Null Arcanum's field. Not just over Kalos, but over the entire globe. I will create a permanent age of man, a silent world, whether you want it or not. The broadcast ended, leaving behind a world plunged into chaos. The ultimatum was impossible. No one could surrender Groudon or Dialga. It was a declaration of absolute war, with the soul of the world as the battlefield. In Diantha's office, the mood was one of grim despair. He's checkmated us, Diantha said, her voice heavy. We can't fight our way to the tower. The entire city is in a panic. And even if we could, Ash, she looked at him, her eyes full of pity. He was sitting down, his head in his hands, the loss of his senses a physical blow. He felt weak, smaller. The monarch was gone, leaving only a tired man in his place. I can't feel it anymore, he whispered. Pikachu. I can barely feel his light. It was Serena who broke the spell. She walked over to him, kneeling in front of him, and took his hands. Her own were trembling, but her voice was a steel anchor in the storm. Then feel me, she said, her eyes locking with his. You don't need to feel the whole world right now. You just need to feel this. She squeezed his hands. You are not your aura, Ash Ketchum. You are the man who climbed this tower once before to save it. You are the trainer who has never, ever given up. Not for a title, not for a trophy, but for your friends. Your power was never the aura. It was your heart. And Kashin can't touch that. Her words, a pure, undiluted expression of her faith in him, cut through the fog of his despair. He looked up, at her, at Alan, at Clement, at Diantha. They were all looking at him, not with pity, but with expectation. With hope. He took a deep breath, and something settled inside him. The aura was gone, but the fire, the one that had been burning since he first left Pallet Town, was still there. Okay, he said, his voice stronger. Okay. So we fight. What's the plan? It was Serena who laid it out, her mind moving with the clarity of a master strategist. Kashin thinks he's won because he's taken away your greatest weapon. He's expecting us to be lost without it. He's arrogant, she began. The null field is his strength, but it's also his weakness. It affects aura sensitives and Pokemon. It doesn't affect the rest of us. It doesn't affect the people. She pointed to the window, at the chaos on the streets. That is our battlefield. Right now, it's panic. But we can turn it into defiance. Diantha, Alan, you lead the ground forces. Not Aegis, they're gone. You fight the despair. You organize the police, the gym leaders, any trainers whose Pokemon are still strong enough to fight. You establish a perimeter, push back the panic, and clear a path to the tower. Diantha and Alan nodded, their roles clear. Clement, Serena continued, turning to the inventor. The tower is your baby. You know every circuit, every system. You are our only way in. You get Ash to the top. But the null field, Clement began. Will affect Ash, Serena finished, her gaze softening as she looked at her husband. Which is why he's not going alone. She smiled, a small, fierce smile. I'm coming too. Serena, no. Ash protested instantly. It's too dangerous. More dangerous than a wedding, she countered, her voice laced with iron. I am the Kalos queen. My voice, my performances, they inspire hope. They are the opposite of this null field. While you and Clement climb the tower, I will be at its base. I will perform. I will rally the people of Lumios. I will create a pocket of hope, of defiance, so strong that it will push back against Kashin's field of despair. I will be your shield, so you can be our sword. Her plan was audacious, insane, and utterly brilliant. It was a strategy that played to all of their strengths, turning Kashin's weapon back on him. Ash looked at her, his heart swelling with a love and admiration so profound it hurt. He stood up, his weakness forgotten, replaced by her strength. All right, he said, his voice ringing with a new, raw power, the power of a man with everything to fight for. Let's go save the world. Again. The city was a war zone. Not of explosions and battles, but of human despair. People were weeping in the streets, holding their limp Pokemon, their faces masks of helpless terror. The team split up. Diantha and Alan became beacons of order in the chaos, their powerful Pokemon, somehow more resistant to the field's effects, carving out zones of safety, rallying emergency services. Serena, with Delphox and Sylveon, made her stand in the center of the main plaza facing the Prism Tower. She started simply, her voice unamplified, singing a soft Kalosian folk song about a sunrise after a long night. Her Pokemon moved around her, their movements weak but graceful, weaving patterns of soft light and gentle embers. At first, no one noticed. But slowly, heads began to turn. Her song, a pure, heartfelt note of hope in a symphony of despair, cut through the noise. People began to gather, drawn to the small island of light in the sea of gray. Her voice grew stronger, filled with love for her home, for her people, for the man who was climbing into the heart of the storm for them all. She was fighting her own battle, with art as her weapon. Meanwhile, Ash, Pikachu, and Clement began their ascent. Clement led them through a series of maintenance tunnels and service elevators, bypassing Kashin's lockdown. The tower was a grim, silent place, the only sound the thrum of the Null Arcanum from the summit. The journey was a brutal gauntlet. Kashin, alerted to their presence, threw everything he had at them. Automated defense turrets, reprogrammed security bots, and the few elite Aegis guards he had left. Without his aura, Ash was fighting on a level he hadn't experienced in years. It was raw, visceral, and exhausting. It was pure trainer instinct. Pikachu, quick attack, dodge left. Now, Iron Tail on the turret's power line. He wasn't a godlike being anymore. He was a partner, fighting side by side with his oldest friend. Every victory was hard-won, every step forward paid for in sweat and bruises. Clement fought alongside him, his Apom arm and his own array of inventions disabling bots and bypassing security, his mind as sharp and deadly as any Pokemon attack. They were halfway up when they were cornered in a server room by a hulking Aegis commander with an armored Rhyperior. The brute was blocking their only path forward. "Pikachu is exhausted," Ash panted, leaning against a wall. "We can't break through that armor." "Then we go over," Clement said, a wild look in his eye. He pointed up at a ventilation shaft. "Give me a boost." What followed was a frantic, desperate scramble, with Ash and Clement using their own bodies to help each other, climbing through vents and service ladders, always one step ahead of Cashin's forces. It wasn't a battle of power, it was a battle of pure will. They finally reached the top floor, the door to the observation deck. It was sealed. "I can't bypass this one," Clement said, his tools sparking. "It's magnetically locked from the other side." Ash looked at the door, then at Pikachu, who was panting, bruised, but still ready. "We don't go through it," Ash said. He looked at his partner. "Remember the Lumiose gym, buddy? The first time we were here?" Pikachu's eyes lit up with understanding. "Pika." "One big push," Ash said. He closed his eyes, not searching for aura, but for the memory of his bond with Pikachu, the one thing the null field couldn't erase. He poured all his focus, all his determination, all his love for his partner into one, final command. "Pikachu, use Volt Tackle. All you've got." Pikachu became a sphere of pure, crackling lightning, no longer just an attack, but a physical manifestation of their unbreakable bond. He didn't hit the door. He slammed into the wall beside it. Steel, concrete, and circuitry vaporized as Pikachu blasted a hole straight through to the observation deck. Ash and Clement scrambled through the smoking opening and found themselves face to face with Cashin. The observation deck was the eye of the storm. The Null Arcanum, a smaller, more elegant version of the weapon they had destroyed, hummed in the center of the room, bathing everything in its sickly gray light. Cashin stood before it, his arms crossed, a look of cold, intellectual curiosity on his face. He wasn't alone. He was encased from the waist down in a kind of harness that fused him directly to his machine. Cables snaked from his body into the Arcanum's core. He had become one with his creation, a being of cold logic and electrical fury. "Impressive," Cashin said, his voice a distorted, electronic hum. "You see, even without your mystical crutch, human ingenuity and determination can triumph. You are proving my point for me." "Your point is a lie, Cashin," Ash shot back, stepping forward, Pikachu at his feet. "You talk about reason, but all you've created is fear and suffering." "A necessary, temporary state," Cashin countered, his eyes glowing with the same gray light as his machine. "To cleanse the world of its chaotic impulses. To create a lasting peace. A peace you and your kind can never understand." He raised a hand, and an arc of raw, gray energy lashed out, not from the machine, but from him. Ash dove out of the way just in time. "Clement, the machine!" Ash yelled. "Shut it down!" Clement, without a word, raced for the Arcanum's control panel, leaving Ash to face the man who had become a machine. The final battle began. It wasn't a Pokemon battle. It was a desperate, primal struggle. Cashin was faster and stronger than a human should be, augmented by his machine. He fired blasts of nullifying energy, moved with impossible speed, his mind a cold, tactical supercomputer. Ash fought with everything he had. He was outmatched in power, but he had something Cashin had long since discarded, unpredictability. He used the environment, ducking behind consoles, using his jacket to short out a conduit, his movements honed by a lifetime of chaotic battles. Pikachu was a yellow blur, a loyal partner harassing Cashin, landing quick thunder shocks and iron tails wherever he could find an opening, forcing the would-be god to divide his attention. Ash was battered, bruised, thrown across the room more than once. But every time, he got back up, his eyes burning with a defiance that Cashin's logic could not comprehend. "Why do you persist?" Cashin snarled, blasting Ash back with a wave of energy that sent him crashing into the observation deck's window, the glass cracking beneath him. Can't you see you have already lost? Your power is gone. Your world is ending. Ash coughed, pushing himself up, his body screaming in protest. He looked down through the cracked glass. He saw the city below. He saw the island of light and hope that Serena was creating, a pocket of defiance that was visibly pushing back the edges of the gray despair. He saw her, a tiny, brilliant figure, fighting her own battle for him. For them. He found his strength. You're wrong, Cashin, Ash panted, a bloody smile on his face. My power was never gone. He stood tall, facing the man-machine. He didn't power up. He didn't glow. He simply opened himself up. You wanted to sever the bond, Ash said, his voice clear and strong. But you can't. Because it's not some mystical energy you can just turn off. It's this. He looked at Pikachu, who met his gaze, and in that shared look was everything. Every battle. Every victory. Every loss. Every midnight conversation, every shared meal, every moment of a life spent together. He wasn't trying to access his aura. He was doing the one thing Cashin's logic could not account for. He was forcing a connection. He pushed that feeling, that lifetime of pure, unconditional partnership, outwards, directly at Cashin. It slammed into Cashin's machine-fused mind not as an attack, but as a sensation. The feeling of trust. Of loyalty. Of love. For a being who had purged himself of all emotion, who had reduced the world to a series of logical inputs, the sudden, overwhelming flood of pure, unfiltered connection was like a universe exploding in his brain. No, Cashin gasped, clutching his head. Illogical, chaotic, what is this feeling? The sensation was so alien, so powerful, it shattered his concentration, broke his link with the machine. The null arcanum, its regulator suddenly gone, began to shriek, its energy turning unstable. Clement, seeing his chance, slammed his fist down on a master console. System overload initiated. It's going critical. Cashin screamed, a sound that was half human, half machine, as the pure, illogical power of a bond he could not comprehend tore his mind apart. The arcanum erupted, not in a wave of nullifying energy, but in a backlash of pure, raw power. The feedback loop surged through the cables connecting him to the machine, overloading his own body. The null arcanum shattered into a million pieces. The harness encasing Cashin exploded, throwing him clear. And as the machine died, the world came roaring back to life. A wave of pure energy, the opposite of the null field, washed over the city. Color flooded back into the sky. The Pokémon of Lumio stirred, shaking their heads as if waking from a long nightmare. Ash felt it like a physical blow. The quiet was gone, replaced by the joyous, deafening roar of the world's aura flooding back into him, stronger and clearer than ever before. He gasped, falling to one knee as his senses returned, a tidal wave of life washing over him. He had won. Not with power. Not with a godlike ability. But with the simple, unbreakable truth of a boy and his first Pokémon. The end. Thank you for watching this video. Please be sure to subscribe to our channel and like this video.